Yes, I'd like to call to order the meeting of the City of Campbell Planning Commission of February 13th, 2024. Can we have a roll call?
Commissioner Fields? Present. Commissioner Wojcicki? Absent. Commissioner Ostrowski? Commissioner Craig?
Here.
Commissioner Bookbinder?
Present.
Vice Chair Pamcar?
Present.
Chair Scissor?
Aye. Okay. By way of introduction, my name is Alan Zisser. I'm the chair of the Planning Commission. Has everybody had a chance to review the last meeting's minutes? And does anybody have any changes, corrections? We're okay. Everybody, we have a motion.
Make a motion to approve the minutes as included.
Second.
Second.
Voice vote.
Commissioner Fields?
Aye.
Commissioner Ostrowski? Commissioner Craig?
Aye.
Commissioner Bookbinder?
Aye.
Vice Chair Pamcar?
Aye.
Chair Scissor?
Aye. Director Eastwood, communications and any agenda modifications. Director Eastwood, do you have any communications, agenda modifications, or postponements?
Chair Zisser, Planning Commission, no agenda modifications or postponements. On item 4, did receive a memo from Commissioner Pamcar, which we have distributed to the commission. Nothing further.
Okay, at this point, this is oral communications. At this point in the meeting, any member of the public may address the commission on an item that is not on the agenda. That person may speak for up to 5 minutes, but the Planning Commission may not take any action today. Is there anybody here who would like to speak at this time? Anybody online? No? Okay. So I'll close that. Okay, before we start the regular agenda items, I want to provide some information on how we will be conducting the meeting for each item. For each item, I will first announce the item and then ask for staff presentation, after which the commissioners may have some questions to staff. After that, we'll open the public hearing and first ask the applicant to speak if they're here or if it's applicable, followed by any other members of the public who wish to speak. We will first have any public speakers physically present speak, and then anyone attending via Zoom. Members of the Planning Commission may have questions for the applicant or any of the public speakers. Once we've received all public testimony, we will close the public hearing, and the commission will then have a discussion and then a motion and decision based on the nature of the item. Okay, commissioners, do we have any disclosures regarding any of the items tonight?
Item 2, 48 Civic Center Drive, I walked by there on the way here. I walked by that. I looked at the site a whole bunch.
This item came before us in the start meeting, and so afterwards, I had visited before, but after the start meeting, I also visited the site, and looked at it, some issues with the intersection. So
Okay.
Just a plan.
I looked at that site too.
I took
that site.
Okay, I took a lap as well. So, let's see. First item. So we go to the item. Okay, let's start with item. That's item 2, right? Well, I skipped something. I already did that. Closed it. Yeah. Okay, so let's start with item 2 on the agenda. Do I need to read this whole thing for the record? Okay, I'll read the beginning of it. Okay. This is PLN 2023-59 48 Civic Center Drive. Public hearing to consider the request of Evan Jacques on Out of the Barrel Incorporated to allow construction of approximately 3,100 square foot, two-level commercial building with a rooftop deck, including a prefab kitchen module, ground level patio bounded by 6-foot fence, and the associated alignment of the Civic Center Drive curb line to accommodate refuse pickup and deliveries, and establishment of a tap room inclusive of an on-site beer and wine beverage service with incidental off-site sales, ancillary food service, live entertainment with a 11 p.m. daily public closing time. The application under consideration includes a conditional use permit with site and architectural review for construction of the proposed building for a liquor establishment with late night activities. And a tree removal permit for removal of protected trees on property located 48 Civic Center Drive. I'll leave it at that. Daniel?
Thank you. Good evening. So item 2 is an application for a conditional use permit, site architectural review, and a tree removal permit for property located at 48 Civic Center Drive. So this is an approximately 4,500 square foot property at Civic Center, west of Harrison Avenue, within the Central Business Mixed Use Zoning District and General Plan District. This is a small remnant parcel that was created when the city created the loop streets around downtown Camden in the 1970s. And it was originally owned by the now defunct redevelopment agency until it was sold after the dissolution of redevelopment agencies in California in 2012. A preliminary application for this property was reviewed by the Planning Commission on November 22nd, 2022. This is a project site taken up this morning. So again, this property has remained vacant since the mid-1970s. It's really only been used occasionally for parking, but for the last couple of decades, it has remained fallow. So the applicant's proposal has several components. The principal, which is the site architectural review, which is for construction of the 3,100 square foot, two-level commercial building that would incorporate a rooftop deck with a prefab kitchen module and then a ground level patio. There's an associated fence exception request that would allow the ground level patio to be bound by a 6-foot fence along the front property line that otherwise isn't normally allowed. And a tree removal permit to allow removal of one 12-inch walnut tree. And then in terms of the operation of the building, the application does include a conditional use permit to allow for a liquor establishment, and that specifically allows for on-site beer and wine service in a tap room environment with incidental off-site sale. With ancillary food service, with public business hours of 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. daily. It also includes late night activities, which the zoning code defines as any activity occurring prior to 6 a.m. or after 11 p.m. And that would be to allow for staff prep and cleanup activity an hour earlier and after the public hours, so from 5 a.m. to 12 a.m. daily. And then lastly, the applicant is also seeking approval to have ancillary live entertainment limited to live musicians, which is technically classified by the zoning code as a dancing and/or live entertainment establishment. All right, here we have an illustrated version of the site plan. Servicing the property, particularly for trash service, is really driving the site configuration of this project. So what we're looking at here in red is the building footprint, and that is overlaid with some elements. You have the rooftop deck, a portion of the building cantilevers over the surface area, creating a covered patio element. You have that rooftop kitchen module and an elevator enclosure. And then here we have a trash room that the property will need to have its 3 2-cubic yard receptacles stored in. In order for those receptacles to be picked up at the city's waste hauler, the site has now proposed a reconfiguration of the Civic Center curb line to allow for a tapering of the roadway leading to a 55-foot loading area over here. So those trash receptacles would be hauled out by the staff for pickup by the city's waste hauler and then be brought back in after pickup. We also are showing here the 6-foot fence that's going to be creating the boundary for the ground level patio for the business. Offsite is a bioretention facility for stormwater management. And then we have some adjacent features here. As Commission may remember, the property immediately to the south was recently approved for a beer garden. And there is a public walkway that traverses both that property and the subject property, connecting the Civic Center sidewalk to the alley located behind the properties along East Campbell Avenue. In terms of the proposed building, here we have illustrations showing kind of the massing on the right-hand side and then the architectural rendering on the left-hand side. The building would be 24 feet tall. It would generally read as a single-story building, again, with that occupiable rooftop deck. It incorporates brick and wood elements that blend a traditional contemporary elements together to create kind of two distinct building modules. So you have the brick side on the right and the wood on the left. And you also see the wood fence located along the boundary along the Civic Center sidewalk. In terms of review considerations for the Planning Commission, your staff report looks at consistency with the general plan, the downtown development plan, design standards for the CBMU zoning district, the downtown alcoholic beverage policy, the city's liquor establishment over concentration determination requirements, live entertainment, traffic safety, public safety, and then the tree removal request. So in terms of general plan consistency, your staff report highlights any number of applicable actions and policies. These policies speak to encouraging creative design that help activate the downtown in a manner that is respectful of historical building forms and historical buildings, that also provide a lot of activity within the downtown, which this project certainly does achieve. Similarly, the downtown development plan provides some additional guidance in terms of how buildings are supposed to be oriented within the downtown. This building does front the public sidewalk, and to provide the level of activity that is envisioned by the downtown development plan. It also has the effect of extending the downtown beyond just East Campbell Avenue further out onto the loop streets, which is specifically consistent with policy LU 6.1. And at the same time, it also does maintain that urban small town feel of the downtown by not overly developing the project site. As indicated in your staff report, this property could actually support an FAR double as what's being proposed, which would be a much higher development capacity than what's being shown by the plans before you tonight. And then in terms of the design standards, so the downtown really has the highest degree of design control in the entire city. There are very specific standards regarding building mass, building form, materials, colors, finishes, storefronts, and other elements. The staff report goes into great detail explaining how this application does comply with all those various facets of design. Generally speaking, these are traditional design principles that are trying to encourage buildings that do fit within the urban fabric of the downtown without overly modernist elements such as glass curtain walls. And so this building does achieve those requirements by incorporating traditional materials, that brick and wood, and a massing form factor consistent with buildings typically found within the downtown. And then in terms of the city's downtown alcoholic beverage policy. So the city adopted this policy in 2009, and it was amended by the city council in 2011. It was intended to provide very specific guidance to the planning commission and to staff when reviewing applications for new alcohol beverage service within the downtown. The 2011 update specifically allowed for wine bars that closed by 11 p.m. So in the 2022 preliminary application study session, the commission discussed whether or not that allowance for wine bars could extend to a tap room as a comparable use in a manner that is consistent with a wine bar. The commission did agree that that was an appropriate determination to make, and that a tap room does have operational similarities to a wine bar. Both have ancillary food service elements and tasting components, which this application would be providing comparable to a wine bar. In that light, the conditional use permit will allow for either a type 41 or type 40 license, both which require some degree of food, and also allow minors that are under the age of 21 to enter the establishment. And the intent here is to keep the business from becoming a full standalone bar that the policy otherwise does discourage. And then this action is also somewhat consistent with the Planning Commission's approval of the Strike Brewing Company in 2019, where the Planning Commission found that a brewery tasting room was comparable to a winery's tasting room for similar reasons. And then moving into overconcentration analysis, as the Commission is likely aware, the city does have a practice of looking at the concept of overconcentration within defined geographic areas. So consistent with past actions, staff does recommend continuing looking at the downtown based on the boundaries of the downtown development plan. So this application would result in the 29th licensed establishment within the downtown that principally includes restaurants and only 2 full standalone bars. And so with the application approval, that would result in a ratio of 1 establishment per 1.31 acres of land within the overall boundary of the downtown development plan, as most recently established by the 2040 general plan. And so that ratio is actually consistent and a little bit less than the Prune Yard, which was granted 25 licenses for its 27 acres at a ratio of about 1 per 1.08 acres. So we're at that ratio where it's still consistent with past action. And then in terms of traffic safety, based on the feedback provided by the Planning Commission at the 2022 study session, and the city did procure a site traffic safety analysis to look at how the roadway reconfiguration would affect site distance lines. So the city's consultant did evaluate the site viewing lines from that intersection across the frontage as proposed, and did determine that it did satisfy the Caltrans requirements for having 200 feet of visibility. And we do have our traffic consultant here should the commission have further questions on that. The consultant also noted that there are physical barriers that are also going to keep people from accidentally entering the street or intentionally doing unsafe crossings across from Civic Center. Principally, you do have that bioretention facility that will actually have a little gate around it that will prevent people from walking into the street and hopefully discourage jaywalking from the library's parking lot. The consultant and public works staff also evaluated this configuration to ensure that it would not conflict with the city's future CIP project to actually reconfigure this intersection away from the pork chop design that's currently there to a more standard T intersection. And then the applicant is also going to be obligated to provide $10,000 to the city for a fair share contribution to that intersection reconfiguration, particularly the ramp that would lead to a new crosswalk. And then in terms of live entertainment, staff did have the applicant procure a noise study to evaluate the potential noise impacts having to do with the request for live entertainment. The consultant recommended installation of glass panels on the rooftop deck at a height of 7 feet to contain the noise. And then staff has several recommended conditions of approval, specifically ending the live entertainment at 10 p.m. on Friday and Saturday, and 9 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, recognizing that even though with the glass panel, that noise would be below the residential threshold, you do have residences that are just over 100 feet away on Harrison Avenue. We would also be requiring an electronic limiting feature to control the amplification so that musicians cannot bring their own amps and create noise that are outside of what was anticipated. And then standard conditions also allow the director to implement operational changes to live entertainment if the city receives and verifies repeated noise complaints. And then live entertainment is also subject to a police department issued permit that also provides another layer of regulation and control should live entertainment become a public nuisance. And then related to that, in terms of public safety, similar to the beer garden application, staff is also recommending that the project include additional lighting onto that adjacent public walkway. So this is a public walkway located on private property that connects, again, from Civic Center to the alley. Right now, of course, it's entirely visible because there's not a building right there. But once you would have 2 buildings, it's going to be a fairly tight corridor. So need for additional lighting, security cameras is certainly there. And then the applicant would also be required to prepare a security plan for review and approval by the police department. Then lastly, there is a 12-inch walnut tree that needs to be removed for the project. Its retention would physically preclude development of the site given the type constraints of the site. This tree is just a volunteer tree that's been growing on the property for some period of years. You can actually see it in 2009 from the Google Street View. It was quite small. It's grown a lot over the last decade and a half. And the zoning code does require the applicant to pay a $600 fee in lieu of replacement since there is no physical place to plant a new tree on the property. And therefore, based on the affirmative determination of the required findings for the conditional use permit, site and architectural review permit, the liquor establishment, tree removal permit, and fence exception, Staff does recommend that the Plan Commission adopt the resolution approving the conditional use permit with site architectural review and a tree removal permit. And then I am available to take any questions commission may have. We also do have police department and public works staff here as well. Should you have any technical questions pertaining to traffic, engineering, or trash management.
Thank you, Daniel, for that comprehensive report. Want to start, Davis?
What is a bioretention facility?
It is a facility to treat stormwater before it goes into the stormwater system, so you prevent contaminants from entering the bay.
Is it like, what does it look like? Is it just flat to?
It's a type of planter. If you've been to the prune yard, some of that in the parking lot, you have kind of deepened landscaped areas that have plants in it. So the water goes in and and through infiltration gets cleaned.
We also call it rain garden.
Yeah, it basically will look like, is it the same thing as a bioswale? Yeah. So right here, this is actually an illustration with the little fence around it.
Okay.
And it's somewhat deep enough that you could trip into it, which is why there's a fence.
On all sides?
On 3 sides opposite the street.
Got it. Makes sense. Thank you. Is the trash pickup truck area that you showed, is that overlapping one of the street lanes at all?
It's outside of the roadway lanes.
It's completely outside of the roadway lane. Okay.
This
So-
allows kind of a de-acceleration of the trash trucks as they enter the area. So the street's over here, so it allows those trucks as well as delivery trucks to kind of move out of through traffic.
How does the truck get the trash since it's in front of the truck, or is somebody gonna come out and pick it up? And
I will defer that question to Perry if you want to come up, Perry.
I'm Perry, I'm the environmental program specialist, Public Works Department. I spoke with our It is a button. I'm sorry. I'm Perry, I'm the environmental program specialist. So I spoke with our contracted haulers for solid waste hauling, and the way they describe it is that this site would be serviced with a front load hauling truck. So the way that the bins would be placed is in a manner so that the truck would have to drive in, slow down, and they would fork it through the front and lift it up. Those are what the front load trucks.
got it.
That answer?
Super helpful. Thank you.
Anything else?
Once she's here,
Sure.
you know.
I still have one more, but go ahead. Yeah, no,
So, if I may, so it brings the like the horns down, it goes in,
Yes,
that's the first one,
yes.
and then it puts it back down. How does it get to the second one?
So it depends on their amount of waste that they're generating. There won't be every single bin out. There's 3 waste streams. Not every waste stream will be out there every day. I do anticipate probably 2 bins at the most at it.
So,
On a
so
given day.
after it gets the first one, does it like back up? And then remove the first one, puts it in to get to the second one? How do you?
So there was a comment that was left that the account holder might have to pay for push-pull services. And that's when the driver, after servicing the bin or before servicing the bin, has to arrange it in a way where that they can go and service the bin that their truck hauls. So if it's lined up appropriately, they'll go in, they'll service it, they'll put it back down. And then typically if it's the first truck of the day, they'll put it back or to the side so that the next driver that comes in can just go immediately in, line up, service, and then put it away. It depends on how far away it is from where they actually store their bins inside as to whether or not the driver will take it all the way back. But that's something that they can work out with the haulers as they work.
Different day, so one day. Sorry, thank you. Is it possible to use, it's 3 different days, so driver does only one bin and doesn't have to back up, doesn't have to do any of that?
So, go ahead.
One truck's not gonna take trash recycling. There's 3 separate trucks. All this.
Yes, but in the event that there is a lot of waste generated in some circumstances where both bins have to go out, it still would be okay as long as you pay for push-pull services. And that's something the account holder can arrange with the hauler.
I'd like to follow up on that. So it looks to me like they're using, going to use these commercial sized bins, right? And so it sounds like they're going to have three, I guess. And that they're going to be in this, is this an outdoor trash area?
It's an integrated room inside the building.
And so they leave the trash in there until the day before. And then does the owner then have the employees take the bins out and put them on the curb?
Likely have been, I'm assuming.
Okay.
That's what
So
most.
that they're at like the night before, so that the question I have is when the bins will be out on in that area for some period of time before the trucks get there versus the trash collector going into and getting them and bringing them out only at the time that they're needed. So that's to me a big question.
Yeah, no, they'd need to be placed out first.
Will be placed out.
And because of how close they are to single family homes, the soonest it would be serviced is 6 a.m.
Okay, and those bins, which are whatever 5 or 6 feet, whatever wide they are, so they'd have to be put vertically 90 degrees to the curb, based on what you're saying, right?
Yes, however, I have heard of some drivers, if you pay for push-pull, they can reconfigure them. But the reason why we have it designed that way is so that if in the case that you do have 2 or 3 bins on the same service day, which likely won't happen, but if that were to happen, there should be enough space to be able to have them there vertically and still have the truck slow down.
Okay. I'll hold any further comments maybe to the applicant or honest to the applicant. Anybody else have anything for? Yeah, I know.
Just for this,
Yeah.
result. So the trash pickup would be sometime after 6 each day.
Yeah, it's usually the commercial sites typically get done early in the morning, but if you're close proximity to residential sites, then the earliest they can start is 6 a.m. because of the noise.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Different question, back for staff.
Okay.
I believe we asked both the beer garden from a month ago and this establishment to add lighting to the alley. Is that correct? Are we making sure that's like coordinated so it's not like, you know, purple mood lighting and then all of a sudden it switches to something else? Like, is it going to be, since it's just one little alleyway, are they going to coordinate on what the lighting is?
Yeah, so I'm still waiting on the details for the beer garden. They just submitted their building permit last month, so we'll certainly look at that coordination.
Okay, but the goal is it's coordinated.
Yeah, we probably have similar Kelvin, so the light looks similar as I'm walking down the walkway.
Great. Those are my questions. Thank you very much.
For the reconfiguration of the street, are the lanes actually changing?
I think the striping is changing a little bit. Matthew, if you want to. You know, the lights, the white lights, the microphone.
Concerning the intersection reconfiguration,
Right.
let me answer it 2 ways. To make room for the loading zone, the lane light has to shift a little, just to keep the lanes a minimum of 12 feet wide. As far as the intersection reconfiguration, it's primarily the alignment of Harrison Avenue. Right now, it intersects with Civic Center Drive at a skew. The intent is to make Harrison Avenue intersect Civic Center Drive more perpendicular. So it doesn't affect the lane lines on Civic Center Drive as much as it changes the alignment of Harrison Avenue. And then we're adding a second crosswalk across Civic Center Drive. And that whole intersection will be like a regular T intersection that's signalized.
And, who ends up funding that type of change?
We are pursuing construction funds. We're currently in the design phase. And yeah, that needs to be determined as far as where construction funds will come from.
Okay, so there's no estimate at this point.
We have very preliminary estimates because we're still in design phase. But yeah, I don't have that figure.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question.
It's not follow-up questions in case you're done with this.
Please.
Hi, Matthew. Nice to see you again. So, on the plans, I noticed there were two sets of truncated domes, for crossing Civic Center Drive. Now, are both gonna be built and then a few years the intersection is gonna be lined, or, it was a little bit confusing the way the plans, and I can point you to the plan sheets.
Yeah, those are shown for reference, just to ensure that there's no conflict with the city's project, but they won't actually be built as part of this project.
Okay.
And the applicant's paying the $10,000 to pay for them in the future.
So that was one question. Thank you for that response. The second question is on the site distance. One of the given was the sidewalk clear. Well, when the place is open, they would be, like in a queue lining up to get in. That will actually, that will conflict with the site distance, is that something that the traffic engineers looked at?
Yeah. We have Gary Black from Hexagon who prepared the traffic safety study.
Yes, thank you. We did consider the issue of people standing around on the sidewalk trying to get in. And as you point out, the site distance drawing does show that if there's congregating on the sidewalk, that could affect the site distance. I'm not saying it would make it zero, because we're looking at trucks that are pretty tall. And so that's what we're trying to see, is trucks in the loading zone. And so they'll probably be taller than the people that were standing around. Nevertheless, one of our recommendations is that the establishment be operated in such a way that there's not a line out on the sidewalk. And the building design that I saw had a fairly large lobby area that would accommodate people that were waiting. That was how it looked to me.
And then, when you're here, there's also a sycamore tree that I believe is there. Has that been taken into account?
Yes, site distance, trees are okay as long as the head of the tree is above 7 feet. So just the trunk of the tree, that's acceptable within the sight line.
Okay. And then what about lighting? Are you recommending any extra lighting?
Recommending that the lighting that's there now be maintained. So there's 3 poles out there now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Real quick follow-up, Matthew, is when is the project scheduled? When is the work going to happen on that intersection? Do we have an idea?
We'll have a better idea once the capital improvement plan is prepared. The city council can decide which year in that plan this project.
It's not on the work plan now.
The design is, but as far as construction, it will happen either year 1 through year.
It could be 5, 6, 10 years. So
It depends, because the project can't be subdivided into parts. I mean, the project includes more than just this intersection, but the project can't be subdivided.
I'm looking at is it on the existing capital improvement plan?
Design phases, yes.
What is it? What is the name of it? The name of the project?
PDA enhancements.
PDA enhancements. Okay, thank you.
And is there a timeline on the CIP as far as the completion of the design?
It should
In
be
a year,
completed by
what year?
this spring.
Do we know, like, is this 2 years out, 3 years out? You know, when the design estimate is for completion?
The design should be completed this spring.
So this is not tied to the library completion. It's separate, independent, intersection change on on the CIP. Right? So this is just going to be done independently. We don't really know when it's going to be completed. We don't know whether it'll be in soon after these buildings will be built. We don't know any of that, right? So you don't really have any estimates at this point, right?
That is, okay.
Okay.
So Matthew, is there a way that this could be put on when you go to city council to, ask for funds, and can you put this portion of it on a priority list? Because I could see people get out late at night, they're kind of tipsy, and they go, I don't want to go around. I'm just going to cut through, a civic center to the library's parking lot, and potentially cause traffic accident.
That concern can be shared with the city council.
Thank you.
Commissioner Buckbinder, you didn't have anything else, did you?
No.
Commissioner Buckbinder?
I didn't have anything to ask, but I had a question for staff, which was.
I mean, in general, I think we're through with.
Thank you very much.
We may need you again.
Thanks, Matthew. Under the changes to our conditional use permit rules, would this project require an conditional use permit for wine bars slash, tap room? Yes, it's still a liquor establishment. Okay, it would only not require it if it were primarily a restaurant. Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Dan, I think when we did our workshop in November, which we had a nice discussion, but was the project smaller then? Was it 2770? Was that,
Functionally the same project.
was it the same? I thought, because I had a different number written down then. Okay. Which leads to my only question, and I know we did I know there's a patio on the ground floor as well as the top, and most people, I guess, will be outdoors. And I know that there'll be live music, but it could be on the top or the bottom, but not both at the same time. I think that was in the report.
Correct.
But my question is really kind of a picky one, but because I know the residents who do live across from downtown, so that's their life. But I don't know what for a 3,100 square foot building, what the capacity would be. But if it is capacity, did our noise study do any kind of a study of just the conversational noise, not even when there's not live music, if there's a noise issue with just a bunch of people outdoors talking and, drinking?
Yeah, I was really looking at the live entertainment, particularly amplified entertainment. The idea that
That would be louder, of course, but
I mean,
it would
similar.
be shorter.
You have
duration.
people outside. It's
Okay, but I guess if neighbors do find that that's an issue, they could complain to the city, and there are potential things we could hire fenced or sign off something, I suppose.
I mean, the glass panels on the upper level will certainly help.
It should work.
People's voices as well.
Yeah.
And again, on the ground floor, you also do have a fence, a wood fence that's going to help contain noise too.
Okay.
But yes.
Okay.
Like on any number of businesses, you will have some level of activity.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So just to follow up on the capacity thing, does an establishment like this require a capacity limit?
Yeah, so there is a occupancy limit based on exiting. So that's a number that gets finalized during the building department review.
So at this point, we don't have an idea of what
It's going to be in the ballpark about 200 people.
total for the whole.
Correct. Their seating capacity as shown is 168 seats. Their calcs are showing upwards of 230 if you really want to pack it in. The city, it's in areas where parking is a consideration, because parking drives capacity. We're a bit more strict on seating counts, particularly restaurants, but this is a downtown environment, so parking is a limiting factor. So more recently, it's really just a little bit of the building code.
Thanks. Commissioner Camp.
Thank you. I have asked the questions I needed to ask. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so after we had, over a year ago, we had the preliminary application thing. As Daniel knows, I had some concerns that followed up, and there's an email from me from about a year ago that's in the agenda. And so I had specific questions about so I'm going to dwell on I'm going to dwell a little bit on the trash pickup thing a little bit, just so that we're all clear about this. So bear with me. So, I expressed concern about the fact that and I understand that the parcel is not connected to the trash alley. Okay. And there's no part of the parcel that is accessible for putting trash in the alley, so that I'm assuming that this is part of the reason why it's ending up on the street. But after I expressed my concerns, I'm wondering if anything was looked into in terms of I'm speculating that the path, this was the redevelopment period, that the path was put in so that if there's something on that parcel, that there would be access to the alley. Now that may not be true, but maybe the owner of the other building would know better. But it seems to me, since we don't have any trash pickup on the major corridors in downtown in particular, and then probably everywhere else, we don't have big bins being put out on the curb, as far as I know, on either of the bypass streets, Civic Center Drive or Orchard City Drive, or on Campbell Avenue, for a number of reasons: aesthetics and traffic issues and parking. And it seems to me that this will be the first one. And I walked the whole downtown to see where all the trash bins were. I have time. When you're retired, you have time to do that. So, without exception, it seems to me that all the trash pickup in downtown is either from an alley, from an alcove, from a side street, from a parking lot, so that there are no large commercial bins that are put out on the street on any of those three corridor streets. So it seems to me that this would be the first. And I don't know if that's a big deal or not, but they're going to be there for every little short period of time that they're going to be. It seems like one could be there one day, another could be there another day, and a third one could be there a third day for some small period in the evening and to the early morning. And that this is on a thoroughfare where we don't normally have commercial trash bins on them. So I'm concerned that if we approve this, we're doing something we haven't done before, and whether or not this is a good new precedent to set. So the question I have is, first, number one, was there any consideration for using the alley in some way, either sharing with another business, because I talked to Brown Cow before they went out of business and they were sharing with the office building, or one of the other establishments, or finding a spot to put their trash. And the second question is, that's taking up 2 lanes, is that not? Is that taking up 2 parking spots?
Yes, you would lose 2 stalls.
That was a long question, but.
Well, yeah, so in terms of the question, yes, the applicant did seek some sort of arrangement with the property owner to the south. Ideally, that would have allowed some sort of either shared trash enclosure or at least access through the property to a zone enclosure. I mean, as you can imagine, that would be substantially less expensive than what is being proposed here. Realigning curb line, rebuilding all that sidewalk, relocating street lamps, this will be a significant amount of investment, much more so than an arrangement with the property owner to the south. Fortunately, he was unable to make those arrangements. And
So the applicant was open to the idea of taking the trash to the trash yard.
well, yes, I mean, so there, if the owner to the south were amenable, there are probably any number of ways that could have worked out. There've been some sort of shared enclosure between the beer garden and this, some sort of right of way access to get to the alley. I mean, there could have been some level of coordination between the two.
Are we talking about one of the other restaurants?
Well, no, I'm talking specifically about the property to the south. Because it's very difficult to move. These enclosures weigh hundreds of
The
pounds.
property to the
So-
south, the office building is to the west.
You know, I'm talking about the beer garden.
Oh, the beer garden.
Yeah.
Oh, there's-
Yeah, the challenge is there's really no
They're
functional
trash.
way to get those enclosure, those receptacles out of the Brown taking brown cow, just right across the alley. And probably today, we wouldn't have allowed that given size of that enclosure. I mean, most enclosures are already undersized. They weren't built at a time to accommodate for organics use, so they're just too small. So the ability to share enclosures really only works on a going forward basis when they're built sufficiently large to accommodate multiple users. So that wasn't really the case. But again, yes, ideally, if he had been able to come to an arrangement with the owner to the south, that would have saved him significant amount of money from doing all this roadway.
Yeah, just to follow up, and this is speculation. The applicant didn't talk to the owner to the west, the office building. Because there are two parking spots in the back adjacent to the walkway. And the office building owner had expressed unhappiness with losing the two spaces on the street. And also the aesthetic issues and things like that. And it would seem that if there had been a discussion with possibly the owner of the office building about using a couple of their spaces to put the trash in, that would be a possible solution. But I was wondering if that was pursued.
I don't think it's physically possible to move those receptacles to the alley through that walkway. It's a pedestrian walkway.
I was thinking of those the bins being there. All the bins are out in the alleyway, and that they would then transport through smaller bins, like circular indoor bins that they use to put the trash in. Because that's what the restaurants do. They take their bins outside and they dump them in the trash.
Well, yeah, well, the applicant could probably speak to the operational challenges with that.
All right. But we'll move on. I've made my point. I guess you've answered my questions on that. And then some of them were answered earlier, so I appreciate that. So as far as deliveries go on that, the assumption is that the trucks would pull up into that space? Is that what the plan would be, so that they would be out of the way of traffic?
Correct. So delivery trucks could also use the loop. So.
Let's see. What goes on? You got the intersection. So the times, it sounds to me like the staff is recommending a later opening time. Is that, or no, you were recommending an earlier close time
For the live
for the
entertainment.
live entertainment. Okay, so I have a question about, maybe this is better for the applicant, about the need for the earlier time to 5 a.m. opening when their hours are either 11 a.m. or 12 p.m. openings. It would seem to me unnecessary to give them that 5 a.m. opening, especially since we're across from the residential areas. So has that come up in any discussions?
It did, and he can speak to that as well.
Okay. All right. What else? Pretty good at Oh, I have a question about the entrances. So it looks like there's a separate patio entrance.
There's a
Is
patio.
that true?
Yes, you
It's on the sidewalk.
can see it right over here.
Okay, so So do you understand how that's gonna work in terms of people walking into the patio?
I think I'll defer that to the applicant.
Okay. Um, And there could be a bike rack.
There's a condition of approval for a bike rack.
You know what the bike rack's gonna be?
No, not yet.
Okay. Could be on the curb though.
We thought about putting it something on the curb, but given the width of the sidewalk, it was something to support.
Okay. Um,
Plus, it's more likely to be used if it's within the patio.
oh, if it was in the patio, okay. Actually, I think that's all I have at this point. Okay, so, does anybody have any more follow-up questions? Anything?
Just a reminder, we do have police department staff here. If you have any security, public safety questions.
So now let's see, we'll open it up. I'll close our discussion and open it up to the public. And the applicant may come up and give you,
It's my turn, finally.
we'll give you 5 minutes.
All right, good. I was trying to bite my tongue.
Could you just announce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Evan Jakes. I'm the owner, the property developer, the applicant. Daniel, do you have the presentation that I shared with you earlier? I wasn't able to connect in, but it at least has some pictures for you guys to look at. There were a couple just follow-up items that some of you had some questions on, that I'd just like to provide just a little more commentary for you real quick. For the push-pull service with the trash, we have a few different sites and a few different properties. You can imagine trash is different at every site. It just kind of depends on the utility, but often you can kind of negotiate push-pull service from a trash enclosure. Our building has a trash enclosure that we could make public to the utility service. Now, again, a trash truck is not going to take all 3 trash, recycling, and green waste, right? It's going to be 3 separate trucks at 3 separate times, maybe on the same day, but most of our sites, they have different pickup dates. And generally, we don't fill up more than a bin once per week. If we needed to, we add a second day, or get a larger bin. But typically it's once per week. So in an ideal world, we have a trash enclosure room that we can give the trash service company the code to. They roll out the bin when they pull their truck up, they dump it, and they push it back. You never even see it on the street. You asked about site distance and people standing and queuing on the sidewalk. We're not an assigned seating type of establishment. It's a quick service order at the counter establishment. And so for that reason, you seat yourself, you come in, you order at the bar, the counter, then you go and sit down. So there's really not much queuing going on. Certainly not that would be happening outside the establishment unless someone's waiting and meeting somebody up and they decide to wait outside. But typically, that's not what we see at our craft beer tap rooms. Usually people come inside, order, and sit down. So not a lot of standing around. I did speak with both my neighbors, the office building and the tenant who's now doing their own beer garden. Their family, by the way, I don't know if you know that. They had no interest in working with me or collaborating. So our initial design was doing trash and electrical service and gas service through the back alley to the public alleyway. That would have saved a million problems, headaches, as Daniel alluded to, a lot of cost savings. They had no interest. I can't control them. It's their property. You asked a little bit about our opening time. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Well, we give earlier hours to retail businesses where they have like we just recently gave an earlier open time to a workout place on Campbell Avenue because they actually have 5 a.m.
40
classes.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Okay, they have 5 a.m. classes.
Right,
So we
right.
actually let them come into the building at 4:45.
Right,
Okay?
right, yeah.
So I looked up your hours. Your hours are
11 a.m.
11 a.m. or noon, right? So and if it was just another thing like a car rental place too, where they're going to have customers at 7, so they need to come in at 6, or they have customers at 8 and they need to come in at 7. So you don't have customers coming in until quite late. So I'm not quite sure why you need the 5 a.m.
Yeah, the caveat with that, I'm sorry to interrupt. The caveat with that is that one of my concepts also is a craft coffee and tea shop. Since we are putting a full kitchen in here, ideally, I would love to also have a coffee program. The coffee shop would open at 6 a.m. But that would be kind of just a small part of the business, not the core. But yeah, closed by,
Use some extra time.
no problem, closed by 11 p.m. every day. You asked about patio entrances?
Patio entrance.
Yeah. We have to create so many entrances and exits, obviously for fire code purposes. You need traffic or people in, people out. So there's the main entrance into the building. There's a roll-up door actually that rolls up to the sidewalk, swing door, and then at least one or if not two entrances into the patio. Daniel, would you mind flipping through to look at some of the graphics, maybe with the layout. Let's do one more. I think there's seating. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so there's one entrance. You can see on the bottom there, the first floor plan, there's one entrance into the patio area.
Okay, that's what I thought. So people would just be able to walk right into the correct.
Yeah.
While you're on the topic, if I can ask.
Okay.
So is it possible to make it where entrance is one side, exit is closer to the crosswalk? So if you're closer to crosswalk, you would most likely obey. If your exit on the other side, you go, no one's looking, I'm going for it, Is that a possibility?
That's a really good point. I think it is probably possible to make the first floor patio an exit only.
Exactly.
And just keep that locked with a push bar. That's, I think, a definite possibility. We'd have to explore on the building side. The entrance into the building, I think, needs to be both.
Right. And so when the Harrison alignment is done, then you can change that configuration. But until then, just so that, none of the patrons.
Yeah, I think the way to solve that would just be to do, like I said, the push bar exit, and then it stays locked.
Right.
That makes sense. Any other questions on the exits? And then a bike rack. My ideal placement of the bike rack is actually in front of the bio retention area. Someone who I bike daily. Daniel, can you flip back to show the bio retention area? There's a picture. Yeah, there. I would do it actually on the other side or one of those sides, so that the bikes are parallel with the street virtually. But racks that I use quite a bit are it's a really thin rack with kind of 2 loops, and it's anchored to the ground. So it's just kind of like a stanchion, just something that you can throw a lock around. But I mean, personally, if you're walking, you have to go around that bio retention area anyways. So what's the harm in putting a bike rack there? Personally, that's where I would put it. And if I were biking, that's what I would look for. Or I would probably, if there's no bike rack there, again, as a biker, I'm probably just going to lock it to that gate. So if we put a proper bike rack in front of it, you're going to prevent people from walking it to the gate, which then causes pedestrian traffic flow issues, right? So put a bike rack on either side of that, whatever. I think that would be my ideal placement, personally.
Is that an extra wide sidewalk area there? Is that wider than the normal small sidewalk that we have in some parts of downtown?
I'm not sure really how to characterize it as normal. We do have our senior civil engineer here if you have questions on the sidewalk.
Well, I just see the sidewalk width out there and, you know, downtown we have like wide sidewalk areas because it's part of the property, you know, like on the north side of Campbell Avenue, there's a lot of extra wide sidewalks. There's some on the south side. And then there's some where it's just this like a standard 3 or 3.5 foot width. So I'm wondering if this is wider than wider than
No, because the curb's being pulled in to make room for the deceleration lane effectively to feed the area where the deliveries would be made and the trash would be picked up. It's gonna be your standard 10-foot commercial sidewalk. I mean, the building is basically built at the property line, right? So it's gonna be consistent with sidewalk you see in front of like the Celtic shop or, you know, if you kind of the main drag there. You do see the wider sidewalk in areas like kind of like around a key, but that's just because they didn't put the building right up against the property line. They have some extra on-site sidewalk that kind of blends with the public sidewalk. But yeah, we obviously need to maintain at least 5 feet between the bioretention fencing and the face of the building. So
on the other side of the bioretention, would it make sense to put a bike rack by the curb there?
the only concern would be just how tall the bike is and if there's any if that would have any sight distance impact. I mean, it like the applicant mentioned, it would be in line with the bioretention, right? You know, it's kind of like when you're walking down East Campbell Avenue and it's tree well, bench, tree well, bike rack. I mean, you try to put all the furniture behind the curb so that you can maintain this clear sidewalk closer to the building, right? So people aren't having to kind of meander through things. They have a straight shot down the streets.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Roger, the ramp that's on this side of bioretention to be able to take the bins out.
Yes.
I could see somebody mistaking that for, hey, there's a ramp, there must be a crosswalk, they forgot to paint it for me, you know. So, does the bin have to be at street level? Could it be 6 inches higher? Just maybe a little peninsula into the street so the truck comes, picks it up, puts it back out and just roll it back?
Yeah, I think in order to make it work, we have to get the bin into the street. We have to get it in the street, right? Because that way when the truck comes up, it has it available.
You know, putting a little, extending the curb into the street, like a little platform for the bin to rest on, for the truck to come and just.
I think the ramp is also designed to serve deliveries and such, right? Because you're going to have a lot of delivery trucks that have, especially probably like, the big beer.
Maybe a sign that says not a crosswalk.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that generally, because the distance across Civic Center there isn't very large. I'm hoping that you can see across. I mean, when you look across, you typically see that it's all landscaping and trees, right? Because the sidewalk meanders behind that planting strip, when it goes kind of up and then down next to the library. So I'm hoping it'll be very visible that there's no receiving ramp or there's just really nothing to get to on the other side, but I understand your concern.
Maybe a sign on the other side saying do not cross.
Yeah, plus I'm not sure, but I think there may be, is there parking over there, Matthew, on the other side? I'm not sure if there is or not, but yeah, again, if there's parking, then it'll be even
Well, there's
more.
gonna be library parking.
Library parking.
Again.
But I don't think there's street parking.
Oh, that's.
Yeah, there may not be street parking there, maybe at that point, yeah, so, but again, it should be hopefully very visible that there's nothing to receive you if you were to go down that ramp, so.
Okay, thank you. Got it. Evan, do you have any more you'd like to say?
I don't think so. I think we spoke about this project a few months ago. I told you generally about the concept. I don't think I need to waste too much more of your time. Just we're excited to be here. It's been a long time in coming. I think we've been working on this project almost 2 years now. So just looking forward to being a good neighbor into the city, being an asset. We are all about creating community around great craft beer, and that's what we're looking forward to doing here.
Does any of the commissioners have any more questions for the applicant?
Just a quick one. Your slide there had a different name, or what were you intending to call this?
Yeah, for legal purposes, this is actually going to be called Barrel and Hops.
You have like 4 other locations, like what?
We have multiple, yeah, I have a couple different corporations and a couple different DBAs out of the barrel. We have out of the barrel in the prune yard, so we need to differentiate and actually have a different DBA.
Because you're going to keep the prune yard location open. I see. Thank you.
Well, we went through the pre-planning review first. I forget how long that took, Daniel. That was probably 6 to 9 months, something like that, before we actually had a formal submittal. We came before the council here once to do kind of a preliminary thing. Out of that came a lot of suggestions. For example, the traffic study, the acoustic study, which we had to perform, took a lot of financial resources, time, but really design-wise on our end, we probably lost maybe 3 or 4 months just from, we had one initial design that we had to kind of scrap and start over with for budgetary purposes. It was unfortunately too expensive. Other than that, it's, you know, Daniel could probably speak to it better than I could. I think we were ready for this meeting in late fall. That sounds right, but there was a lot on your plate and a lot on your guys' agenda in terms of what you needed to review before you're ready for me. So we've just kind of been in a holding pattern, waiting. I understand there's a lot going on, but sure, I would love to see things move faster. Thank you for the explanation. For sure.
Okay, so I have one more question. Would you have any problem with our including a conditional use for the push-pull of the bins so that the bins do not, so that they come and get the bins and put them back?
I have a problem with conditions being placed on me that are out of my control. And so there's multiple parties involved, right? And I'm not saying that I don't want to be the one responsible for moving it in and out. I'm just saying I have to contract with the trash service.
That's what I'm talking about.
And exactly. And while I can make every effort to ask them to do what you're asking, it's out of my control and they may say no. And so I wouldn't want to see the entire project hung upon a condition that I have no control over, if that makes sense.
Does the city have any say in this kind of thing?
Barry, do you want to take that?
In short, I would agree with what he was saying. Normally I would say to always be open to push-pull, and we can require people to do push-pull in order to make sure that they're in compliance with other areas of the municipal code. But I have seen the haulers deny push-pull because of the condition of the road or how heavy those bins can get. So if there's like little lifts after like the cement erodes or the asphalt just starts getting cracks in it, and those bins get very heavy that it can be difficult for the driver to maneuver, they might deny push-pull. So then it is on the hands of the property owner to ensure that the bins get out there and are put back within the time frame of the municipal code. Does that answer? Thanks. Sorry.
Any other? Are there any other speakers? People who wish to speak? No? Yes.
Yes, police department did review this. As noted, their concerns were really ensuring that it was limited to beer and wine and closed at 11 o'clock. It does.
I have one other question. So, you know, with regards to the bins on the street, on that street, or any of our corridors, there are no regulations of the city. There are no policies that we have had in the past based on where, street side pickup, where the bins are out on the street. There's nothing in our codes or regulations that restricts that.
Perry, do you have any requirements?
So we obviously have, I mean, I haven't gone to every street in the city, but I've been here for 4 decades and I've been up all the corridors and everything. I'm not here at 6 o'clock. I'm not there at 6 o'clock in the morning, but it seems to me that we don't have pickup. We don't have street, bin in commercial corridor on the curb. Okay, we have them obviously in residential areas, right? Because you have to small, they go into residential areas, you put your bins out and this get picked up. So it seems to me that, I don't know what happens in redevelopment. I don't know what's specific to downtown, but is there a policy in the city or is there regulation in the city that, that stipulates that trash can't be picked up in this manner on a major corridor where there's a traffic issue, an aesthetic issue, whatever it might be?
So there are a few sites that do actually have commercial bins that are serviced on our roadways. But they're not actually serviced. You won't see them on Civic Center, Campbell, or Orchard. This would be the first one. And that's only because the commercial bins are serviced with front load trucks. And so there hasn't been a way for a driver to do that, especially on Civic Center, unless we were to do the rearrangement in the front like they've designed. So there are bins that are serviced on 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Street. And that's simply because the truck has to have an in and out, and depending on the plans, the hauler doesn't always back out onto a certain street. So it just depends on the traffic flow of that street, and their comfort with, or their driver's comfort with servicing that site. But yeah, we do have some bins that are serviced on some streets. It just depends.
I was specifically talking about a major corridor. It's the Civic Center Drive, Orchard Center Drive, Campbell, or for that matter, Hamilton, Winchester, Basco. They're not commercial, as far as I know, they're not commercial bins. They're picked up on the curbs on our corridors where the traffic is, 1st, 2nd, 3rd Central are side streets.
Yes.
And they're not trafficked as much, right? So that makes perfect sense. I mean, I sit out at Starbucks and this big delivery truck comes around at 6:30 in the evening when people are still on the street, and it's this big, huge delivery truck for Starbucks and parks on First for 5 or 10 minutes, delivers, pulls the ramp down, delivers the stuff, and then drives off. Okay, and it fills up the street, and it's kind of weird because it's at 6:30 in the evening, but that's a side street, and it's different than if it were, on Civic Center Drive, stopping without a place to pull
Yes.
up. Okay, so I was specifically talking about corridor issues where it's clear that the city avoids that doing it. And so I was just wondering if there was actually any codes or regulations that say, we're not going to do that.
There's nothing that says we can't do it. I will say when this plan was first sent over to the haulers, they immediately said no until they put in that cut in for the slowdown, because they were concerned about that. They said they weren't going to service that street. So it's not because of the municipal code that we've never serviced on a street like this. It's that the haulers were never comfortable before. And so we had to accommodate to figure out how do you provide this kind of utility for a site like this.
Thank you.
And I will add, having pickup on a major corridor is not unusual in San Jose. I mean, in my neighborhood, I live off the Alameda, and there are mixed-use buildings that basically have nowhere else to put their trash bins, and they're right on the Alameda, which is a major commercial corridor. It's a function of a very tight site.
Any other questions? Oh, well, we're going to go into question area. We're going to go into comments area to comments from the commissioners. So Commissioner Buckbinder, how about we start on your side this time?
Sure. I am a bit sad that it took this long for the applicant to get to this point, given that this land has been fallow for literally 50 years. I'm like really excited that it's actually getting developed. I think it's a testament to how difficult it is to do this kind of thing. Presumably, it's this the next round of regulatory reform that we'll be talking about after this. I read through each and every one of the letters that go to the public. Just one of the things that I really understand everyone is very concerned about is parking. And I, as a note for the public, cannot regulate parking down in town by state law.
Sorry.
By requiring more. You can regulate parking by requiring residential parking permits or by installing meters, but we cannot insist that anyone provide off-street parking. This is AB 2097 that requires this. Apart from that, I think this is a really excellent project. This is the sort of thing I personally have a great affection for roof decks. Glad we're getting a roof deck. I definitely understand people worried that they'll be living near a downtown, but this isn't allowing for particularly late night music. The sound is limited, which I think takes care of all the reasonable concerns here. And in any case, like this is downtown. We don't need to make our downtown absolutely silent because people live near downtown. I think all the compromises are beyond reasonable here. I'm definitely in favor of this project. Those are my notes.
Yeah, well, really, I agree. Yeah, this is really a unique project for downtown and our jewel. It's really just an imaginative use of that for that space, and with the size of that space and the configuration, I guess it's not shocking that it's been fallow for 40 or 50 years. It's such an unusual spot, and I really commend the developer for coming up with something that would be unique, assuming we approve it, would be unique for Campbell. But I do think that the concerns by the neighbors were certainly legitimate. The neighbors, of course, as we pointed out many times, they moved to an area right across from downtown, and downtown is, as Commissioner Bookbinder said, it's downtown. It's going to be a little noisier. So I do think that the measures we put in place work. I think our concerns on Civic Center Drive with the trash cans and delivery trucks, really very valid concerns. But I think we're going to be okay. I think we've got enough room there. It would be great if they could do the push pull. Looks like we can't demand that, or I guess we could, but maybe it would be pretty tough. And the other thing, what I did have some questions about the pedestrians on the sidewalk queuing up there, and that was all answered here. So when people walk out the front door, if they've been drinking or whatever, we got the bio swale there with the fence, so that does stop it. There are crosswalks not too far on either side. They go left or right, and so, I think we're pretty safe. I think we've been pretty cautious on the project. We gave a lot of good questions. We got a great feedback from the developer and from staff, of course. They did a great job. They really do a great job on the alcohol licenses and those tables. I know we've used them before. They're very helpful. So, and I think we're fine on that sense. So I do think this is a project that is a plus for Campbell. So I'm in favor.
Supportive of the project. It feels like if anyone was ever going to build there, we were going to have to deal with this trash pickup thing. And this feels like a really nice upgrade from the plans we looked at before in terms of safety and moving the street. So great job to city staff and everyone for figuring out an option there. very excited about the business. I think the coffee concept sounds like a real advantage too. There are a lot of alcohol places downtown, but there's not a lot of morning coffee, maybe nice pastry. So I hope that is something you pursue. Overall supportive, thank you to the officers for coming. I know we didn't ask any questions, but appreciate everything you all do. And thank you to staff for the thorough report. I echo Commissioner Bookbinder's comments that I wish this had all happened faster for you.
So in addition to what my fellow commissioners said, I'm also supportive of the project, and I think the design is really fantastic. So I know there have been multiple iterations of that as far as the design, the scale and size. So I think it's like definitely really gorgeous design, matches with the library. I think it's that whole area, and it's going to be a really nice addition to Campbell for families with and without their kids. Good balance between work through all the safety and noise and hour considerations. So I think it's cool. So thanks for all your time and work on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm also in support of the project. As someone who works on sites, this was a very tight site. It's, kudos to the public works and traffic engineers and the consultants in making it all work, because just too many things happening. It's on a curve, it's, short street, and so many things in the way, but it looks like everything is answered. One of the, just like my colleague said about the design and the architecture, the other thing I was impressed with was, how receptive you are to suggestions, when you recognize this could be, bust for a great project, and you are working towards it. So for those reasons, I'm also in support. Thank you.
Okay, I echo pretty much all the other commissioners on this. As it's I reconcile myself on all the issues with regards to any noise issues, and I think there will be a potential issue with regards to jaywalking. I think it's it's going to happen. I know that area really well, and I probably jaywalk there. So the reconfiguration of the intersection, whenever that happens, would be a great addition. I think the sooner that we could do that, the better. But obviously, the applicant doesn't have control over that. We don't have control over that. That's just something the city needs to maybe push up in higher priority, especially with this going in. So that would be having that closer crosswalk would be, I think, make a huge difference. I think the biotreatment, having the biotreatment area there, buffers it a bit in terms of people. If there is congregation on the sidewalk, which some people do before they go in, before they go out, before they leave. I was dwelling on the trash thing because I was like, if we could avoid this, that would be great. And it sounds like the applicant made an effort to, or at least initially was actually planning to use the alley, which is nice to hear that this wasn't an automatic foregone conclusion to do it on the street. So I'm not excited about trash bins being. I hope the applicant considers working with the waste management the folks to collect West Valley. I guess it's West Valley, and see if they can do a push pull, because it would be nice not to have those bins sitting out on the street, especially if they're going to be at 3 different times. So otherwise, I think the changes made, if we have to do it this way, make perfect sense. in terms of adjusting the curb and the redesigning of that so that the deliveries and the trash can be picked up. So I think that you know, it's a great, like others said, it's a great use of it's a great use of the space. I used to be bothered by the fact that they let the weeds grow, and you know, I was always about ready to call the city. And when I found out the city didn't own it anymore, it's like, oh, okay, maybe it'll be taken care of. So I'm definitely in favor of that as well. Anybody have any other further input? Should we can I have a motion?
You're the motion man.
I'll make a motion that the planning commission, city of Campbell, grant approval of a conditional use permit to allow construction of approximately 3,100 square foot, two-level commercial building with a rooftop deck, including a prefab kitchen module, ground level patio bounded by a 6-foot fence, and the associated realignment of the Civic Center Drive curb line to accommodate refuse pickup and deliveries, and to allow use of the property as a liquor establishment, inclusive of on-site beer and wine beverage service with incidental off-site sales, ancillary live entertainment and late-night activities, and a tree removal permit to allow removal of a 12-inch tree on property located at 48 Civic Center Drive. That's PON 2023-59.
You have a second?
Second.
Second.
Fields got that.
Mr. Fields. So we have a motion from Commissioner Cray, second from Commissioner Fields. Can we take a vote?
Commissioner Fields,
Aye.
Commissioner Ostrowski,
Aye.
Commissioner Gray,
Aye.
Commissioner Bookbinder,
Aye.
Vice Chair Comcor,
Aye.
Chair Sister.
Aye. That passes unanimously, 6-0. Nobody thinks. Can we take a 5-minute? Say at 3 after 9. Good luck. Good luck.
Thank you guys, too. Appreciate it.
We'll call back into session item 3, PLN 2023-175, permissibility of land uses and regulation of businesses, public hearing to consider amendments to Title 21 zoning, Title 5 business licenses and regulations, and Title 10 vehicles and traffic of the Campbell Municipal Code related to the permissibility of land uses and regulations of businesses. Staff is recommending this project be found categorically exempt under SEQA. Council date is March 19th. Project planner is Stephen Rose.
Good evening, Chair Zisser and members of the Planning Commission. So as tonight's item is going to be familiar to most of you, I will plan to briefly touch on key events leading to tonight, as well as highlights of the update. So just as a reminder, the city's in the process of updating its economic development plan. Stakeholder feedback to date has really emphasized challenges navigating the city's permit processes and a desire to streamline them. In addition to that, the Planning Commission had an ad hoc Planning Commission, which had subcommittee of the Planning Commission, who had similarly identified various land uses warranting streamlining updates. Coming out of that process, we had identified a number of objectives and principles, and really the purpose of the update is to really focus on areas where the city may easily streamline permitting requirements. Most recently, the Planning Commission had a study session back in October of last year, where there was over a dozen different land uses identified for streamlining efforts. Separately, in December, the City Council also agreed, but directed staff to also include streamlining for police permit requirements. So they liked what you guys were doing, but they wanted us to go a little bit further by expanding to Title 5 and Title 10 of our municipal code. So this is a kind of an overview and reminder. While police permits are typically outside the scope of the Planning Commission to review, as the changes that are being made to these two other titles of our municipal code do result in the addition of new bingo and arcade requirements to the zoning ordinance, we've included these changes just for clarification purposes. Generally speaking, the changes do result in the removal of many older police permit requirements, with the zoning ordinance serving to capture key operational requirements that are important to retain, particularly for bingo and arcade. So in regard to the change of the zoning ordinance, consistent with the objectives and principles of the update, the proposed ordinance reflects amendments to the zoning code to streamline permit processes, specifically within the commercial, office, and industrial zoning districts. The changes do have a more limited effect on the downtown and areas within master plan, such as Winchester Boulevard Master Plan, as well as East Campbell Avenue Master Plan, which do have that history of stakeholder involvement, and as a result, were not identified as easy to change, as relating back to the key principles of the update. The update also does, however, clarify use distinctions in all zoning districts, including the downtown master plan areas. So where there was a word or phrase that was not as clearly defined, these changes are being more broadly sweeping. That said, the streamlining itself is accomplished in really three ways. It's through changes being made to the land use tables, changes to special use requirements, and changes to definitions. So on screen is, just as a reminder, the land use tables are really those tables which indicate a use being a C, it would be a conditional use requiring an approval by the Planning Commission. AC is administratively approvable by, say, the Community Development Director. P are uses which are permitted. So I'm not going to go over in detail the individual changes, but I kind of want to provide an example of the table here on screen. And I think it would actually be better if we were to go over a few kind of quick case study examples showing really these changes in action. So the first of which is one of these large studio uses, which is one of those land uses identified for potential streamlining. Again, the existing permit process today requires a conditional use permit, sets back an applicant nearly $5,000 to $6,000, takes 4 to 6 months. Under the proposed process, would be through a zoning clearance. Process as quickly as within a week. When the use meets certain restrictions on the percentage of a shopping center or property which they operate, or when they're picking a spot that's at least 50 feet away from a public right of way, which is identified with this tier 1 requirement or on our form-based zone map. So the example you have here is, I know on the prior item we were discussing, right next to Strikes is a little fitness studio. So this is an example of one of those little small mom and pop fitness studios that would be now permissible by right. Another example is a Pilates studio over at the Lloyd Square Shopping Center. So these are both examples of uses which would now be streamlined on a going forward basis. Another case study is beer and wine. So the Planning Commission and ad hoc subcommittee that directed that a desire to streamline just these really beer and wine only focused restaurant activities. Again, previously a use permit is now going to be bumped down to an administrative conditional use permit process. So it's not quite as fast as being permitted by right, but there is a faster and more streamlined outcome of this process. But there are additional restrictions on operations which are being imposed to the special use requirements, those being that if you are being streamlined, minimally you need to have full service food at all times, alcohol sold so it doesn't turn into a bar. This is getting back to the objective of trying to avoid unintended consequences. Just to show how this compares so the last example was 48A on our land use table. That's a full service restaurant. This is by comparison, is a quick service restaurant as we've now defined it. Under this scenario, the key difference is that this would still be an administrative conditional use permit, but only in a general commercial zone. So just to compare these two, when you're a full service restaurant, so you sit down, you have service, and you have cutlery and all that kind of good things, it'd be an administrative conditional use permit in either a neighborhood commercial or commercial zoning district. Whereas when you're having these quick service restaurants where it's more quick and to go type activity, like Mod Pizza here on screen, this would be through an administrative conditional use permit only when it's in a general commercial zone as opposed to neighborhood commercial. So there's still a little bit of a distinction between these two zoning districts that's retained as part of this update. And just next up, and just as the last example, retail stores, we've combined a bunch of different use activities that our old code is very hung up. Very focused on exactly what type of merchandise that was being sold. So if it's a hardware store, or if you're a furniture store or a department store, this is very merchandise type neutral. It doesn't matter what type of widget you're selling. It's really just governed by the size of your tenant space. And these are three examples. So Jeffrey's Diamonds on Hamilton Boulevard would be this type of facility. It's smaller. If it's under 10,000 square feet, it'd be through zoning clearance. Whereas Staples, which is the next step up, a little bit bigger, this would be an administrative conditional use permit approved by the director. And the last tier up would be, say, a larger facility like such as Home Depot. That would require a conditional use permit approved by the Planning Commission. So in addition to the changes to the land use tables, I previously touched on a few of these, but these are just changes to special use requirements. Again, we've added new requirements addressing arcade and bingo. We also have added special use requirements related to alcohol related uses. Again, this is how we effectuate those changes about you have to have full service food at all times that alcohol is being sold when you're in ancillary use. We also added minor cleanup items related to motor vehicle repair as well as tutoring centers. And finally, and last but not least, streamlining the code has also been achieved through retiring several older use types, such as blueprinting shops and that type of thing, and combining other uses with other listed uses, which are otherwise compatible or comparable in nature. So an example would be, doesn't matter what type of retail activity you are, we've kind of grouped all those activities together. And as a result of that, some even retail uses which have been previously separately characterized, let's say medical retail like LensCrafters, might have fallen under that medical clinic use, is now grouped under the definition of just general retail sales. So that's how we've effectuated streamlining that particular type. Same goes for thrift stores. We've also amended the definitions of restaurants. This is really helping provide clarity in the differences between fast casual and full service restaurants that our code previously didn't provide. Just in terms of next steps, again, the intent is to adopt these changes with the economic development plan, which is slated for the city council meeting of March 19th, 2024. And with that, that concludes staff's recommendations. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution recommending that city council adopt an ordinance reflecting the proposed changes tonight. And that concludes staff's presentation. I'm available for any questions.
First off, thank you for the very thorough staff report. This is very readable, and I really appreciate the summary. One of the top lines that I'm very impressed with is, I think we're reducing our number of land use types by 1/6. We're getting numbers from 108, 150, which is amazing. The questions I had were, I know that type 123 medical services laboratories is going from, in general commercial, it's going from permitted to conditional. This is more restrictive. Is that on purpose, and why?
That's correct. The change is made to be comparable to our processing for medical clinics. Right now, a medical laboratory used to be like a dental lab where you're getting teeth being made. And the way it was previously characterized, it was a permitted use in a general commercial zone. So it could have allowed a kind of I want to say, a use that was not very pedestrian oriented to occupy key tenant spaces in commercial buildings without any type of discretionary review process. This was a change that was deliberately made to try to draw a parallel minimally to medical clinic uses, so that they'd also go through a similar discretionary review process.
And medical clinics are not going through that. If it's only 10% of the commercial use, then it's permitted. If it's only 20%, it's an administrative CUP, and if it's more than that, it's regular CUP. They're not doing that.
Not for the laboratory use. That would be exclusively a discretionary use. So again, the idea being that a clinic use, you'd still have customers coming up to it. They'd be engaging, interacting with it. There'd be generally some form of transparency where you'd view into clear glazing, like the windows would be clear, you could walk in and engage with them. A laboratory is usually more like an industrial use. So those are uses which we want to have a lot more permit restriction over.
Just for context, a laboratory here, is that something like a LabCorp or Quest, or is that something different?
Laboratory could be, again, you could have prosthetics made, you could have under laboratory, you could also have blood draws potentially. That would be probably the best example of a more pedestrian oriented laboratory use. Almost all other laboratory uses which we see come before are more orthopedic in nature, or they have some other type of medical equipment that they're either processing, refining, or changing. Again, if you're getting Invisalign made, a laboratory could be the location where the Invisalign plastic is actually being fabricated, as opposed to a place that you personally engage with to go get the services, like a dental office, which would be prescribing Invisalign.
Okay, that makes sense. That was the main question I had.
Thanks a lot, Stephen. This is, I can tell, obviously, it's a lot of work. Got to go through all this stuff, and I'm glad that Commissioner Bookbinder added it up, because I know we're making it a lot simpler and reducing all these numbers. But I do have a number of really quick kind of picky kind of questions, just in terms of simplicity. We say restaurants / cafes and stores / markets in a couple of instances. Is there any reason why what's the difference between a restaurant and a cafe and a store and a market? Can we just use one of the words, or?
It's a good question. We're providing multiple instances of a term as it may be used as a turn of phrase, I suppose.
I just don't see the.
Oftentimes, if I characterize a use as, say, fast casual or quick service, somebody might trying to navigate our code quickly might not use that exact term or phrase as quick service. So having the additional term as a backstop of being fast casual, as another user may characterize or use, it is more quickly and more understand exactly which.
No, I think that's fine, but I mean, it wouldn't say quick service cafe. No, I mean a quick service restaurant. You know what I mean? There's just extra wording that we don't need, but that's maybe neither here nor there. I was also going to ask, studios, that's kind of what is exactly, how do we define a studio? That's just a lot of different uses, I guess.
Yeah, I like to characterize studios as these are more fitness related activities, like karate studio is a good example. So somebody goes in, there's usually one on X number of people, personal instruction activity. without with generally an appointment, but it's not what walk-in.
Okay.
It's a good example of a studio.
It's kind of a catch-all, I guess, which is fine, but
Is it tutoring place a studio?
Tutoring would be is a separately defined use as tutoring centers are.
they have tutoring centers.
Yeah, so they don't, that's more educational in nature, more academic. Usually you're getting some type of instruction that's less physical in nature.
In terms of the studios, I was kind of surprised to see that they're not allowed in the professional office zone. Has that always been the case, or?
Studio uses, that's correct. Yeah, I mean,
I wonder
that's
why.
an example.
It's in every other, it's okay in every other.
Uh,
I thought.
I couldn't tell you the exact rationale behind why studio uses is not permissible in the professional office. I do know tutoring uses is one of those uses which we allow there. And again, it's permitted by right in that zone. So
It just seemed odd that it wouldn't be allowed in the office zone, but maybe that's just me.
I could say, I mean, if you think about it, office uses are the type of activity and the type of clientele you have going to those locations are more, again, like a professional office setting. You imagine a karate studio entering an office building.
Oh, right, yeah,
Ground
that would
floor.
look a little weird. Yeah.
And that's kind of and it might have different signage, and there might be other reasons.
Is a counselor or a therapist considered a studio? They have a office for counseling or therapy.
That would be a professional office use.
Professional.
You probably don't know this right off the top of your head, but I thought in reading this that I'm wondering about used car sales. Will we be moving the permit requirements for used car sales?
No, so there's two things that's happening. One change is in Title V, where the police permitting requirement would be removed. Again, the zoning ordinance would still remain as a backstop to those changes, so we would still retain a discretionary land use entitlement requirement in the zoning ordinance. What's changing is we're allowing for an administrative conditional use permit to be processed when meeting certain locational operational requirements. Say the use is more than 500 feet away from a residential site or use, then rather than being a use permit, it's now administratively approvable.
Okay, all right, because that's sometimes controversial. And one other thing, kind of in housekeeping wise, and I don't know if this come up before, it probably has, but in a couple of the uses, in the levels of permits, we break it out to less than 10,000, or less than 10%, and then 20%. So we use 10% and 20% as the delineations. And so my question is just, which seems fine to me, it seems sort of logical, but where did we get the number, the 10% and the 20% as our baselines for these? Do you know? It comes up in a couple of.
Yeah, so for those examples, like a medical office use, the intent was just to create a floor by which if an allowance of a shopping center to occupy, say, up to 10% as permitted by right, medical clinic use could occupy like a shopping center, like the Whole Foods on Baskin Avenue. Those are just numbers that you could put in any number you really want to establish that triggering event, in which case when they cross a certain threshold, it warrants discretionary review process. So I would suppose to say, looking at other shopping centers and those that do have medical clinic uses, generally speaking, the ones that they do have one or two generally represents less than 10% of the gross square footage of a shopping center, like the Whole Foods shopping center in Baskin Avenue. Example there would be Carbon Health, technically the CVS Minute Clinic and the D12 Love would constitute that the kind of 12% or that 10% of the gross square footage of that particular shopping center.
Okay, so I mean, there sort of was some reason, I guess.
Yeah, we do have tables showing what each shopping center has, and that was taken into some account.
And just one final little picky question is, if I read it right, so we're not allowing drive-through in the neighborhood commercial district. I don't know if that's a change or not.
That is always, that's not a change.
That's not a change, okay. Thank you.
No, I was involved in the early steps, and my only question was like on email was about what were the substantial changes from the last time we talked about it. And I think as Commissioner Brookmeyer noted, this is the changes were all making things even more readable, which was really exciting, and adding a road, a point, and, you know, any special requirements that might relate to a specific usage. So no questions.
No questions for me. This looks like a lot of.
No questions for me either. Great presentation.
Yeah, I appreciate all the work gone into this, and I was hard pressed to go. I was just at this point assuming that you've got all this stuff right, but you know, I was reviewing some of these things like, are we gonna, is the taxi cabs part of this discussion? Or is that gonna be something as part of this discussion, because it's in the same resolution, right? Okay, so first of all, the arcades, there's just, I just read, you know, it's like, on page where you define arcades, page 39 of section 39. Page 39 of the PLM. It's 180 something.
It shows 181 in the packet.
It's 181 of the whole packet. Okay, so I don't know if I'm just misreading this, but you know, it says arcades means establishments providing 3 or more amusement devices within an indoor amusement and entertainment facility. 2 or less amusement devices are not considered a land use separate from the primary use of the site. This land use does not include arcade games or other activities located within private entertainment facilities. I don't understand that last sentence. It seems to be contradictory, but I may misunderstand what you're trying to say there.
It's trying to say there is a distinct land use which is applied, which is a indoor entertainment facility. So it's trying to say that it's trying to draw a distinction. And this is, again, an existing section of code that was not being edited. So you can see that the red text is what's new. So the last sentence is an existing provision dealing with if you have an indoor entertainment facility, so you open up a new, I don't want to say like a bowling alley, that use itself already triggers a requirement for conditional use permit. And if you happen to have arcade devices within that broader umbrella of a land use activity, it's not going to trigger additional requirements pertaining to arcade.
Okay, but in the first sentence, you say arcades with 3 or more within an indoor amusement, provide 3 or more within an indoor amusement and entertainment facility. And then you use the same term.
I see.
In the last sentence. So that seems to be contradictory.
I would recommend to strike the last sentence of that petition.
Okay. So I wasn't totally off base there. All right.
It doesn't help it, so.
Yeah, all right. So we can hopefully do that as part of the resolution. And then, yeah, I just, you know, the taxi cab thing is new, and I just, you know, I wanted to be clear on what this says. It sounds to me, and I'd actually talked to Rob a little bit about this yesterday in our prep. It sounds to me like we require permits of taxi companies and drivers, even if they're not based in Campbell, and if they're just coming to Campbell. Is that true?
I'll take that. That's true, and it's required by state law.
All right. And so the taxi companies like in San Jose that service Campbell and Santa Clara, and Sunnyvale, wherever, they have to get permits from each of the municipalities, and their drivers have to be included, and all those other requirements. That's the way it is, right?
That is the way it is set up under state law, yes.
So what about shuttles and limos?
Different. They are largely exempt from regulation.
Okay. Is that a good thing or bad? And then, you know, the obvious other question is Uber and Lyft. Okay. It seems to me Uber and Lyft are taxi cabs, but they're not, apparently, right?
Correct. They are not. Once again,
I mean, basically, your definition of taxi cabs says to me, if you're picking up somebody, they pay a fare, there's a schedule, that's what a taxi cab does. And that's what Uber and Lyft do. But we don't cover, that's because the state hasn't caught up or what?
Well, I don't know that I can answer for the entire state legislature. But they have shown deference to website platform purveyors.
Okay, all right. I'm not surprised. Okay. Does anybody have any other questions?
I did. Is it way out of scope to suggest that non-pedestrian oriented uses could be permitted when not on the ground floor?
So within so you're speaking in terms of the context of the downtown or central business mixed use zoning district, pedestrian oriented uses are permitted by right. And you're saying on upper floors, we do provide for uses and they're enumerated. A term such as non-pedestrian oriented would be almost too broadly defined.
Right, here I'm talking about, for example, medical laboratories.
So those uses are specifically, well, I'll go back to the principles of the update.
Sure.
So the mix of uses that you have in that table in the downtown central business mixed use, that took, I think, 3+ years of coordination with the downtown chamber of commerce, the downtown association, the city council to work out the land uses you see in that table. I would generally recommend steering clear of potential changes to those tables.
So
as
what I'm
part of this
suggesting is
streamlining.
very non-trivial here.
Right.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. Just wanted to check to see if, can we easily do that? The answer sounds like it's no.
One thing I'll note, the commission, I say this as I'm reading the draft economic development plan. There's a recommendation in here that annually the city should talk to brokers and business owners and get feedback on pain points where businesses change and try and get permits. And I'd say this is step one. You picked low hanging fruit, and the principle was to stay out of areas where you need extensive stakeholder engagement or legacy issues like downtown and alcohol. But if the economic development plan goes forward with this recommendation, the idea is, hey, annually come back and look at where can we go next. So don't consider this a be all end all of looking at regulatory reform. I think the thought is to take what we can here, but then as a learning organization, we'd adapt our codes on an annual basis.
So for example, if next year we wanted to talk about allowing 5 a.m. staff opening times in the downtown area, for example, that would be something that we would work on.
Could be, yeah. Yeah, again, we'd have to think about time and effort versus what we intend to achieve, but start there.
Okay. It's with motion time.
I could do this.
All right.
I'd like to make a motion that the commission adopt a resolution recommending the city council adopt an ordinance amending Title V, business licenses and regulations, Title 10, vehicles and traffic, and Title 21, zoning of the Campbell Municipal Code.
Can I ask for the amendment to strike that one sentence, arcade definition?
I would just, indicating a request to strike the last sentence from the definition of arcades.
Okay. We have a second. Can we take a vote?
Commissioner Fields,
Aye.
Commissioner Strasburg, Commissioner Crane,
Aye.
Commissioner Gluckmeyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Kemper,
Aye.
Chair Caesar.
Aye. That passes. Stephen, thank you. That was very comprehensive and I'm very impressed with your being able to handle all that detail. With only one sentence strike. Okay. Item 4, study session. Still on 2024-19 general plan land use densities. Study session to discuss land use changes implemented as part of the 2040 general plan, project planner Stephen Rose.
I'll start off real fast. Rob Eastwood, Community Development Director. So this isn't a normal business item. The commission might remember you had agreed to agendize this item, I believe, in November. I have that date wrong of last year. So we do have a lot of work plan items. I'll just admit, we haven't put a lot of staff effort into this because it competes with many business items that we need to bring along in our own work plan. That being said, Senior Planner Stephen Rose put together an informational memo to educate the commission if it has questions on the two areas desired. And with that, I'll let Stephen present the information he has.
Great. Thank you again. And just as captured by Development Director Rob Eastwood, the subject item was added to tonight's agenda at the request of the commission to facilitate a discussion on land use changes made as part of the 2040 general plan update. Also discuss gaps in the density ranges and as well as changes to the city's method of calculating gross lot area. So although we had probably dozens of meetings over the last few years on the general plan and related housing element update, two key events leading up to the city's current approach to density and land use are captured here on screen. The first of which occurred back in September of 2021, where the city council received a study session to discuss whether the city should change its method of calculating gross lot area and whether it would be advisable to exclude counting existing right-of-way. So depicted here on screen, it is very difficult to graphically depict the differences in gross lot area. I'll be first and foremost to admit. But this is showing the city's old method. Imagine the area in blue is a parcel boundary of the limits of the property. The old method used to calculate and include the entire surrounding right-of-way, which is that area which is kind of highlighted here in yellow, up to the center line of street. So that's kind of this area A. The city council considered different ways of calculating density and they were presented even a table explaining various pros and cons of either retaining our existing method or switching to a new method, which would exclude that kind of area you're seeing here in yellow. Ultimately, the city council decided to change its method. So what we see now in this area B, which includes the parcel boundary plus areas, which may need to be prior to dedication of additional right-of-way. So pretty much as the property exists at the time of application submittal. That's pretty much essentially the way that we go about calculating density today. Again, just in terms of the second key event, this is all memorialized and adopted and established as part of the April 18th City Council action approving the new general plan and housing element. So I don't plan on going over every single particular change to the land use designations before and after on our old code, on our old general plan and the new one. This here you see on screen to account for the difference in the city's method of calculating gross lot area. There are changes to the ranges. So let's say the previous low density residential, less than 3.5 units per gross acre under the old general plan is now less than 4.45 under the new general plan. So with these changes, there are gaps between the density ranges. Now, it's important to note that these gaps did exist prior to the adoption of our new general plan, but they're really emphasized more given the expansion of these ranges, so they're more apparent, I would say. So again, the old gap, it was say 13 to 14, this area here in the density range, where in the new it looks larger, even though the method is just a scaling of how the numbers play out mathematically. Just in terms of the impact that gaps have on projects, projects are required to conform to the general plan land use density ranges. So projects which don't or want to propose a project at a density that doesn't fall between those ranges are effectively unable to develop at those very specific density ranges where there is a gap. Gaps are often in many communities deliberate in order to control development outcomes. So if you want to have a certain area developed with exclusively townhome type development, you might establish a range and you might have a gap in that density range. So the next block over develops lower density detached single family homes.
You might have another gap where between those townhomes and the next development up, you wanted to have multi-stacked flats or something like that. So although it is often deliberate in many communities, I will also mention that if we didn't have, these gaps are often easily overcome by various state laws, including state density bonus law, SB 6, AB 2011, just to name a few. And one other thing I'll mention, which is not in the report, but I think is worth mentioning, is that you can also add accessory dwelling units now to lots in a way that you used to not be able to. Now it's up to 3 per lot without impacting density. So it's just an additional consideration I'll mention. So where you have these gaps, if a developer wanted to have more units in that property, they may certainly do so by, adding accessory dwelling units. So just broadly, and in conclusions, the city council had considered the pros and cons of changing the city's method of calculating gross lot area as part of this update. They understood the impacts that would have and decided to make the change. Although the gaps do appear larger as a result of this update, they did exist in the prior general plan. This is just really an extrapolation of the numbers. The density is also largely, I'll characterize it like this, baked in. So when we make changes at the general plan level, that has implications that carry down through all levels of all the documents that we do. So it changed it's reflected in the zoning ordinance, it's reflected in the various area plans. It goes the whole way down, all the way through our multifamily development design standards, the form-based zones. Everything is affected by density. So that's really the core aspect of land use planning. And then lastly, as the real world impact of these gaps is relatively minor and can be easily overcome by various state laws, it's not advisable for staff to propose a change. So hopefully that helps. And I'm available for any questions.
Okay. Would you like to do your thing
If I may.
at this point?
If I may, if it helps, if I may, there's a few points that Stephen mentioned that I like to address, and then I'd like to show you some of my analysis. So Stephen, can we go back to the last slide you had, your conclusions? Thank you. So if I can start from the bottom one where you say the real, well, before I start, I have to make a disclosure. Thank you. So out of transparency, my own property is actually affected by these decisions. Okay, so that's one of the reasons, I want to make sure, you guys understand. So this is not just other people's property. My own property is one of the properties that is affected. When Stephen says these gaps and these
Excuse me, your own property is affected.
yes,
Okay. That presents a conflict issue.
why?
Because, well,
Well, if you're living,
how is your property affected? Is the development potential of your property affected?
the number of units that are possible if I were to develop will be affected, just like,
And then we need to go to the analysis of whether you are affected in a manner substantially similar to a significant segment of the city. Answer that's probably yes. There's probably more than a third of the city that would be affected in the same manner that you would be affected. I mean, would that be fair to say? A third of the
This is your
residential
your
units or a
residential.
third of the population? Do we know? I'm trying to. I do this on the fly.
This was adopted in the general plan a year ago. So this is a past action.
And this is
Yes, but
Bill, this is a study session. We're not voting on anything.
that doesn't matter. You're not allowed to consider something or discuss something in which you have a conflict as a member of the commission.
well, I mean, everybody's
So-
property is affected when you raise
I
the,
would think everybody's.
everybody's affected.
That's the question that that I'm pondering is whether the exception for a significant segment of the community applies. And that was why I was asking the question of my staff up here. It would seem to me that more than a third of the property, of the residential property in the city would be similarly affected.
Yeah, depending on, if you were to specifically say the residential land use designations of the city, excluding commercial, industrial, mixed use, and we were only talking about the residential groupings, I'd say yes, more than a third.
All right. Then, okay, I think we're okay.
Okay, thank you so much. So, so I wanted to make sure that disclosure is out in order of transparency. But my property is not the only one. There is many other properties that, I try to explain. So I want to start with that the real world impact is not minor, because the example that Stephen put on the TV with explaining what the gross lot is and what the net is and everything, that was based on, if you can go back to that screen, Stephen, it was I think, like, yes, that one. So that considers a pretty deep lot, whereas the 30-foot or 40-foot or whatever the half street width is not significant to the rest of the depth of the lot. But in fact, many lots in the city are not that deep. They're much shallower. Thank you. And that half street is a much bigger percentage of that total area. So the reason the yellow used to be part of the calculation, because that was the lot limits. When city comes through and says, I want to put a road through your property, they take that property away from you to put a road. But then in the calculation of the units, they still go to the center because they want to make sure they don't take away from your ability to develop. That's why that has always been there. Now, city council has the right to go ahead and change that if they wish, like they have, but normally you compensate for something like that. You don't just take things away. You compensate to make sure that you're not violating the taking clause of the Constitution. The gaps, I want to address the gaps before we go to my presentation. Those gaps, the problem with having gaps is it totally ignores our whole missing middle mentality. We want to give, the developers and homeowners to provide what we call missing middle type of development. We did a whole, study on that, the rooftops, whereas property that has a rooftop is part of a missing middle. Our recommendation was to provide that. What this ignores that. And the third one is the RHNA numbers. If you have, our RHNA numbers is 3,000, we have to make 3,000 units built, not just permit, but build 3,000 units in 8 years. 1 year has already gone by. And the state housing, HCD, I've heard that they're not going to wait till the end of 8 years to say, well, did you make your quota? They're going to check in 4 years. They're going to say, have you done at least half, if not more? And normally, as you know, it is the lowest hanging fruit that's easiest to pick. Once you pick the lower ones, the higher ones are more difficult to build. So building half of it is easier than building the second half. So when they check and see, no, we haven't built it, because our 17-acre technology park, says, I'm not going to build to 75 units an acre. I want to do 30. And so we got to make sure the smaller developers can make up the, the units that we thought we're going to get from them, but most probably we can't. And so with these things in mind that I want to present the real world effect of the housing. Now, staff has already recognized corner lots really get affected. You know, in their own analysis, they go, okay, so they lose on both sides. So all of a sudden, half of the development is taken care of, and they're taking steps to fix that. What I'm trying to communicate here is that the lots on the interior, which is next to corner lots and all the way to vertical lot, those lots are also affected, you know, and I just want to make sure we see the effect. So I was told that I can present something, Stephen. I was going to share. I'm not controlling it though. You know, I think Stephen has put it up. I'm a panelist.
Oh, you can.
So if I may share, thank you. And I believe, where am I? Is that, does that show up? Okay. So is that visible? Maybe a little bit bigger. Okay. So I just want to, this analysis, I have taken 12 examples of, you know, what a lot dimensions would look like, and the effect that, you know, the before, which is the prior land use designation of, for example, in this case, a low medium density residential 6 to 13, and a post and a 2040, you know, after the change was made, which is 8 to 16. Do you guys see that? Okay. So mouse is not cooperating. Do you see that now? Okay. So the first example is a lot that's 80 by, let's say, 96. 80 feet wide by 96 feet deep. Now, when you get to the gross calculation on a 60-foot right-of-way, which is the street, 30 feet or half of it gets added to the depth. So you're really talking about an 80 times 126-foot property, which is almost 10,080. If you convert that square footage to acres, you get 0.23 acre, and you multiply this by the maximum number of units that were allowed back then, and you get 3.08. And then you, the way the staff does it, they take away all the decimal places and only use the whole number, becomes 3. 3 units are maximum allowed under this scenario. After the change was made, and you make the same calculation, except that right now, instead of 126 being the depth, it's only 96, because they're not going to go to the center of the street anymore. And if you do the math, now only 2 units are allowed. I don't know if can you guys see it? Okay, so 2 units are allowed, and that is a loss of 1 unit. Now, out of 3 units, you get 2. That's a 33% hit. That's huge. When many projects don't pencil out when you take such a hit. Now, let's say, now this example works not just, you know, if it's a 96 foot depth, it also is the case. I think I need to make this a little bit smaller to be able to go through. If anything between 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, up to 102, this is the case. And that's what that column is, meaning that up to that depth, this thing will happen. Then the next question is, well, what about smaller lots? What about, let's say, still 80 foot wide, but it's only 54 foot deep? You do the same calculation, 84 for pre gross calculation versus 54 for post 2040 numbers. Again, instead of 2 units, we can only do 1. Another loss of 1. Now this is a 50% hit, and so now this 54 can be as high as 68. You get the same, minus 1. Let's go to a deeper lot. If it's 75, okay, so that one actually changed. Okay, so that one. Okay, so this is an example of if it's a really deep lot, which is what Stephen was showing. You could only do 6, but then now you can do 7. So when it's a deeper lot, they are actually helping the homeowner by this. But when it's a shallower lot, you're not. So if it was a 75-foot wide by 60-foot deep lot, it becomes 90 in a pre-calculation, stays 60 post-calculation. Difference from 2 to 1, you are again losing 1 unit, and the 60 can get us 72.
So so you're saying if the lot is deeper, you're benefiting.
The
Because
30-foot doesn't hurt you.
doesn't hurt you as much. And therefore, like the fact that the density increased as a result of the new land use,
Is less than the
that,
loss.
that relative ratio
Exactly.
helps you versus the loss of the relative ratio.
That's perfect. You caught that perfectly, and that's what this number is. This is 67%, meaning the loss you take. That's 60 divided by 90. You get 67%. So it's a 33% loss versus a 23% gain. So they're giving you 20% gain by upping the limit of the density, but then they're taking away 33%.
Yeah,
and-
so it like the increase in the density doesn't help you, it doesn't compensate.
Perfect. Now, another thing, as if that was not enough, it's the, under this calculation, you can build 1.65 homes, but you're not going to build 0.65 homes, so they, instead of rounding it up to make it 2, so that our policies rounds down, to 1. And that's another thing I want to bring up to attention is, why don't we round up? I understand that we might exceed the general plan limits. I get that, but what's the crime? We're just adding 1 extra unit to a project, which is what the state wants you to do. State just add density, add units. So I want to bring this out so that we could. Yes.
Just to throw this out there, rounding up would sort of cover up the problem, but the basic problem is that we're reducing density. We're changing the way we calculate lot area. That means that we are in effect reducing density. As I understand it, SB 330 says you can't do that. There was a whole case in Culver City about, can you in effect downzone a single family area? And the answer was, that is also illegal to do. They went to appeal and everything. It was CMB law versus Culver City. It looks like we accidentally downzone single family areas, and I see Stephen is shaking his head.
Yeah, I could clarify. So in a scenario where you have an individual property, you propose a downzone, that would be an SB 330 violation. What we did as part of the general plan and housing update is we expanded and increased the aggregate fence density citywide, which more than offset the change you're talking about here. So as a limited example, what Commissioner Kamkar has identified is that there are definitive winners and losers with the new mathematical model. Those very small lots and those corner lots are more impacted than, generally speaking, interior lots, deeper lots. So if you took the citywide average density that existed prior to the code updates, even in these lower density residential areas, that adjustment from the 3.5 dwelling units per acre to the new 4.5 actually resulted in a net increase in density citywide, which is what HCD, SB 330, all that stuff are okay with. They're okay if the result results in more density. They're not okay if the change results in less density.
So you're saying it was a net positive change, and that actually was calculated for all of our parcels, all added up?
Correct. It took into account the average difference in right of way. That's why actually in the example you're seeing, I forget which one it was here on the screen, where you now have 7 units. I think it's example.
This is
3.
right here, yeah.
That's an example of one of those lots that's actually being advantaged. So that's the winners category.
You're saying that those are
It's the same.
numerically more numerous than the losers category.
There will be more winners
Yeah.
citywide than there will be losers.
But the winners are all the bigger lots.
The winners are, I would say, characterized as lots which have a lower percentage of right of way under the old methodology to their I don't want to go to the remaining gross lot area. I don't know what term I want to use there, because we're changing the definitions of these things, but the existing net lot area. So those, and then corner lots as well, were also disproportionate, because again, you used to count 2 sides of the street. Even the example which we produced on screen, the Cressley project in Campbell, happened to be fronting onto 3 sides of a property. It was in a finger island. So you got credit on
The peninsula.
the east, the north, and the west side of the property, which resulted in kind of an anomaly in terms of skewing the numbers. I would say that, I mean, this is all discussed as part of that city council study session. And we did indicate that there would be winners and losers, and that there would be an impact to corner lots more than other lots. That was a reason why keeping the current methodology might be an approach that we take. I mean, it's consistent with past practice. There are other reasons we presented in that particular report, but for all the other reasons, like it's difficult under the Housing Accountability Act to know what your density is at time of application submittal. The city is going to be taking land dedications and doing other things and messing with your density. We didn't want to challenge those elements.
What was the net change on in total?
The net, I'm sorry, I don't know if you could
Change,
clarify.
you said it increased zone capacity, like by what proportion?
It was actually intended to be as close to a wash as possible, because of to land at solid values, like a 4.5 versus a 4.43984931.
Right.
Numbers were rounded up to over the delta of the difference between. It's complicated, but I'll try to explain it, but I might fail. The difference between the parcel boundaries, the parcel area, and the citywide right-of-way areas, we increased by a factor equivalent to that, and then rounded up the resulting differences. It's actually explained in the report, in the study session. I think on page.
Well, I guess what I suggest, so a couple of things. This was, I started here. 2 things. One is the city's past method of doing gross was non-standard. I don't know of any other city that calculated.
San Jose does it.
To my knowledge, yeah, most cities, it's the 4, if you ask someone what the size of the property is, the 4 corners of the property. You don't try and estimate how much you got on the street because you don't own that area. It's a very non-standard way of doing gross lot area. That being said, we went to the council and said, do you want to keep that method? Or do you want to use the new method? We put out all the pros and cons. And the council said, go with the new method. Stephen, I believe, did a white paper write-up on A, the SB 330 issue, B, the calculations, and presented that to attach it. But I say this was well deliberated before the council and they made a clear decision. Use the new method.
So Director, if you check with your public works section, many home deeds currently still have the street in them. Okay, so when you say you don't own that part, I understand where you're coming from, but if you look at, some of the, if you talk to your like land surveyors in your public works, you know, they would explain that, well, I happen to know San Jose does it because I used to be a planning commissioner for city of San Jose. Always go to the center of the street, you know, and I would calculate, you know, and I checked with a couple of other land use consultants. They were like, what? Campbell does what? You know, they were surprised that Campbell is now going to the thing, you know, so that's one item. The other item is this rounding thing, you know, like on the example I have on the screen right now, example number 5, the result, it results in 2.931 units, 2.9 units, but we just chop off the decimal and make it 2. If this gap wasn't there, if the 16 to 18 gap wasn't there, you wouldn't have this issue with this type of example. It's that the definition of we don't want this type of product in this thing. How is that not subjective? You know, I thought we're supposed to be voting on objective, you know, standards, and this so-called gap is something that we're trying to push in. Why? You know, why not increase the density of the city like the state wants us to do?
Well, the only thing I'll say, Commissioner Campcar, is the city tripled its densities under the housing. So like 275 units per acre, so that whole were 200% above our RENA allocation. This discussion today has to do with my understanding, a low to medium category. And again, since you bring this subject up, I haven't heard from any of our developers or stakeholders coming in and saying, I have no ability to develop in the city of Campbell because you have a gap in your units. The only area I've heard that is from.
No. I mean, I'm definitely not saying they cannot. I'm just saying you're decreasing the number of units. Even under your own analysis, you say it's only a couple of units that they cannot develop, so it's not a big deal. Well, if you're developing 30, 40, 50, maybe it's not a big deal. But if you're developing 3 and it goes down to 2, that is a big deal.
Well, and you know, I would just say, Commissioner Campcar, I mean, I appreciate that this is an area of expertise for you, but this is a concern for you, but you know, in response to your reasoning about trying to make RENA, whether we gain one here and one there on a few residential parcels is not the issue in terms of trying to reach RENA. And the HCD is not going to come on. It's not going to come after us because instead of in the first half of our RENA, we only, instead of getting to 1,000, we only got to 950 or whatever it is. I mean, the handful of units that we're talking about is not the issue with regards to making RENA. It may be an issue with homeowners that have small parcels that want to do more with redeveloping it than they could under these rulings. But I don't think it's valid to suggest that the concern should be this is going to hurt our RENA, because to get to the RENA, there's a bigger issue involved in terms of having more major developments, 50 to 100 to 200 to 500 units, rather than the piecemeal stuff that we would get from a handful of residential redevelopments to put in 3 units instead of 2 units. I mean, that's my personal take.
You know, and I appreciate that. The issue, however, is this is not just small properties issue. This is shallow properties issue. When I say shallow, 100 feet, I'm saying could be shallow. 100 feet is not a small, 100 foot lot is not a small, it's not a small lot. So if let's say you could do 5, now you can do 4. If you say you could do 3, now you can do 2. You know, these things adds up. And if you can subdivide the property into 5 lots, that's not a small property. So if you think this is only affecting small properties, that's not the case. It affects properties that are shallow. When you take away that street width to the rest of the lot, it creates, and especially when we round down the number of units, so director said we tripled our, our number of units that was needed. I think I think it was 997 was the calculation. We made it to 3,000.
Requirement is triple.
Right. The question is, just because we made that our requirement doesn't mean it's gonna happen.
Well, we didn't make the requirement.
No, what I'm saying is that
The state made.
I know, state requirement, I think we had, was it 997 or so-called?
Was it 900?
That was the prior, that was the prior
Prior
session.
It was
number.
930 or something.
And then if I'm not mistaken, we tripled it to increase the chance of getting it, right? Getting to the
Well,
997.
I don't want to take the question too far on this report. The arena assigned to us was approximately 3,000. We did major changes to our land use densities for higher densities, but the total capacity that we planned for is almost up to 6,000.
So we put in a double buffer. We put in a double buffer, okay, which was not required. The buffer from the state was quite 30%, right?
So can I ask a question? So I appreciate these calculations. They're like very well done. They're very clear. They're very quantitative. It clearly illustrates the problem that when you have a deep lot, you don't have a problem. If you're like in the middle of the cul-de-sac, you don't have the problem because your frontage is super low. You're very advantaged. The issue is with shallow lots and the issue is with corner lots. So what do we do to make those lots whole? Because many times we've sat here and we've said, yeah, this is great, but corner lots, or in some cases cul-de-sac lots, and now we're saying shallow lots, they're like disadvantaged, but we basically just push it aside and keep going. And I think we need to change that, because now what we're saying is, okay, if you have a large lot, if you're a developer, if you've got, a large property and it's deep, which most large ones are gonna be, you fall into this category where the increases in the densities benefit you, but on the lower end, there's a significant disadvantage. And I'm glad you pointed this out. I think it's not a good idea to disadvantage homeowners, to disadvantage the middle class, and to benefit developers in order to get to the numbers that the state wants us to get to. And I think this is like a very clear, disadvantage to homeowners, and we are all here to basically represent homeowners and represent the community.
It's our job to bring this to the attention of city council, as people in charge. And it's not just shallow lots. I'm telling you, 100-foot lots, some of my examples are more than 100 foot. So it's not just, shallow lots, even any kind of lot.
Yeah, I mean, if you used to be able to build 2 units and now you can only build 1 unit, this is like a significant financial impact to people who had an understanding of a certain way that they were gonna.
You could deliberate on all of this. This is a past action, which the council you as a commission could vote. To forward a recommendation to the city council to reconsider this issue. I mean, at this point, I'll just say the community development work plan is beyond full. But if the council believes it's a priority, then it makes difference.
I mean, I think it's a priority, and I think it like nicely piggybacks off of the last item, which we talked about, which will hopefully reduce the workload on the staff. That's pretty much the intention, is to streamline things, reduce the workload. Steven's laughing because I'm sure it's like,
Well, this was,
So, priority setting, as I understand it from the city council, is happening at the end of the month. Show up and talk to them. And additionally, we do have a source of extra capacity if we want to use it there. It's up to the chair's discretion, but we can make proposals via a subcommittee if we think that city council will be able to receiving them and have minimal to no drag on staff time for doing that as an option, I believe.
can I just ask, Rob and Stephen, this was interesting, stuff that I didn't know, but it sounds to me, what I'm hearing is that really pretty much this discussion that we've had, more or less, the city council already had.
Yes.
They've already
I
had
don't
that,
think
right?
they knew the ramification though. That's
This
the
is
issue.
like one
well,
of those
that's my
unintended
Did
consequences.
they
which
know?
often comes up.
They knew the winners and losers, though. I think that's what Stephen was saying.
I mean, we can provide you I remember it fresh because it was my very first council meeting where we talked about the general plan. I told Stephen up front, we need to talk about this issue with the council. So, I mean, Stephen wrote like a three pages in the memo. Clearly understand there were winners and losers. Going down to these granular calculations on each individual lot, of course not. But there was clear knowledge and presentation to council that if you had to your point, Commissioner Ostrowski, the narrow frontage, you would be a winner. And if you had a lot of frontage, you would be a loser. Council deliberated that and they gave direction to move forward with it.
And if I may simply add, I do know a number of communities do the method of calculation which we presently use. The reason for that is they feel that corner lots are unfairly advantaged going the other way. Under our old methodology, it was unfair that a lot that's on a corner or like Cressley that's surrounded three sides gets a disproportionate density over a lot of the equivalent area without those street connections. So what was the basis for that additional increase in density was that question in those communities. And that's why a lot of cities use the current approach. I will also offer it is incredibly ingrained in the housing element methodology. It would require an entire update. The housing element, our housing opportunity sites analysis, all the math that goes to support all of those conclusions. And it would be exceedingly challenging to do the analysis. A big part of the reason why we switched to our current methodology was it was almost untenable for the city to analyze our projections on how many housing units could occur without analyzing the adjacent right-of-way of every single lot on a lot-by-lot basis of the entire city to determine what its half width of the right-of-way would be under that kind of mathematical scenario. It's very easy for us to calculate the projected yield of a site based on its parcel area, but it's much more difficult to calculate the resultant yield to a half width of the street, which is oftentimes a more or less defined feature, especially when there may be future dedications, other things in play. So the only other point I'd make is, although the examples on screen are examples of some of the losers, some of the more extreme losers on the scenario, where if you were to pick the absolute worst parcel that got impacted by this particular change, would result in the need to have an on-site density of like 500 units per acre to resolve the difference. Because there are situations where the net lot area of the parcel is less than the adjoining right-of-way by an extreme measure. So there are some I'm looking at one on the screen here, like corner of Creekside and Campisi Way. It's a very thin, narrow edge of a parcel that is not really a parcel. So some of these aren't necessarily even resolvable necessarily by changing density. I just want that to be considered.
Okay, so when you said though that all of this was taken into calculation for the sites that we designated as being the development sites, I mean, I would ask how many of those were the single family homes that we're talking about? Because if I recall, we were mostly talking about like larger properties along busy corridors. And to me, that's completely separate from what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and if I may clarify, the city's approach to these changes in density ranges was taking into account an aggregate set. So again, although there's winners and losers on the overall whole, there will be more unit production as a result of this change, theoretically, without actually checking each individual lot to confirm. But generally speaking, because the adjustments were up and scaled up and rounded up, the next half or whole number under the methodology the city established back in 2021, that there is a gain to be had. On the individual housing opportunity sites, it would have been exceedingly difficult to have gone through that analysis, even getting to the point of identifying and selecting the housing opportunity sites without having made this change.
Well, one last thing I'll offer is the ability of single family homeowners to develop has drastically changed. So
Right.
I don't know what the crosswalk is, but where in the past you had to have a minimum lot size, one house per lot. Under SB 9, anyone can do a duplex on the property. Anyone, regardless of the size, with minimum exception. and subdivide their property and put a duplex on each lot that comes out of that. So that's been a total transformation of the ability to develop.
SB9, see the problem with SB9 is it has quite a few other issues. It has the residency issues. It has quite a few other issues. That's why you haven't seen it occur that often. If I'm not mistaken, in Campbell, we have what, 3 or 4 of them? So it, if that, I mean, so my understanding is that SB9 was not a success. So I don't think we can challenge it.
Early. I mean, SB9 has only been in force for a very short time, and people doing lot splits. I mean, most single family homes are on 60 by 100, and then some are on 60 by 200. Okay, so when you're on 60 by 200, you could do it lot split. If you're on 60 by 100, there's no way to do a lot split. You can put an ADU in the backyard, but it's the house is covering more than 60%. With the frontage, it's covering more than 60%. So there's no practical way for a standard single family home 60 by 100 to do a lot split with their backyard. I think in many cases because of the 60-40 rule. And if they could, I mean, the alternative is to put in an ADU and you'll end up getting your second unit. So I may be wrong about that, but I think it's more applicable to a deeper lot and the question, and then being able to go in and put up, like we did with the one that was just off Winchester, where there were actually 2 parcels and they ended up putting up 6 units because there was a significant enough parcel size to do that. But it was basically two parcels that were put together. So I really don't, I mean, SB9 has been in place very long, so I don't think you can tell whether it's been successful or not.
I don't think this, you've helped convince me that there may be opportunity here. I think we need to probably move though to looking at recommendations, given city staff has indicated they're not going to probably be able to have the capacity to judge this. So I echo Commissioner Bookbinder's idea of maybe it's a subcommittee, but there seems like there's a there, but probably to move the needle, we should talk about a proposal of what we would change versus.
Would you like to tell us about whether or not you feel there's something that we should be passing on to council?
I mean, I wouldn't say anything right now. I think if we wanted to come back and say, hey, this is what we're doing right now. Can we look at this part or piggyback on the exploration they're doing on it that you mentioned? That I'd be fine with looking at at a future.
You mentioned that staff may not have the time, but maybe a subcommittee that I would be happy to be a part of would have the time to look at parcel by parcel and see, how many of these are affected. Because I know, because I know there is much more of these parcels than comes to mind or is being presented. So,
and I'm fine with that, but I think otherwise, we're 3 hours in, and I'm just sensitive to what time.
Let's have a comment on this.
I think that I agree with Commissioner Fields. We're not going to solve this right now. If we agree that there is an issue to be solved here, then our opportunities are to form subcommittee, to attend city council's priority setting session, try and get this up to the radar there. But I was not aware that this was part of a sort of a net change that was mostly a wash. I can understand that people who lost out would be upset about this, but that honestly makes it considerably less urgent to me, given that this.
I mean, I can understand that other properties got a bump up and some of these properties don't get a bump up, but to get a bump down, that's like a double whammy.
So I would also mention that we are, I believe this year, going to be talking about our SB10 program, which is our affordable housing program for single family areas.
Those are apartments.
That if you want to redevelop a single family area into multiple units
Right, as an apartment.
as apartments, that is a significant change that would kind of be more important than the change between 1 and 2 units. This may be on the, a fix to this may be on the radar, maybe not in the way you'd expect, but this may not be as crucial as it seems right now. In any case, we are not going to be able to solve this right now, and staff does not have the bandwidth to solve this right now.
So may I make a motion then to make a recommendation?
So I'd like to make a comment on this. So I don't see the urgency of this, and I'm not convinced that there's a real world, a real world issue in terms of harming very many property owners in the real world. So I am also not willing to second guess the city planning and the council, and actually the commission, who also reviewed the general plan and all the new changes. I'm not willing to agree to second guess all that work that went over a 2 or 3 year period, and kind of accept that they got it 95% right, or whatever the number is, and that this is not, as Commissioner Brenner says, not a crucial thing that we should be pursuing at this point. And so I'm not in favor of moving forward with any kind of effort to pursue this issue at this point myself.
What were you gonna say, Commissioner Campbell?
Thank you. So I was going to say, when chairman says, I don't know, I'm saying, let's find out. Let's do know. Let's have a subcommittee. Let's find out how many units are affected by this. And then we can decide, that's not a big number, or, hey, well, that many, well, that's not okay. We got to do something. So that's why I'm suggesting to have a subcommittee, and I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'll put in the time as subcommittee member, to check this out and present that to the commission and then staff. And
Yeah, I think it's an more important topic, and I think it's great that you're willing to do the work and do it. I mean, the reason we're all here is to review the projects that come before us and the work that staff has done. I mean, they obviously do great work, but that's why we volunteer here, is to just make sure there are multiple eyes, multiple levels of experience, multiple people with different backgrounds, and people who represent different parts of the community. And I think that it's great that you brought this here before us so that it's an issue to you, and you're going to highlight, how big of an impact that issue is going to have on the rest of the community. And at that point, then we can take a look at what can we do? Maybe there's an exception. Maybe there's some way to handle it without, redoing all the work that's been done in 3 years. I think there could be lots of different options once we have more of the information in front of us to that decision.
Absolutely. Well,
I don't know if we need a subcommittee if you.
Based on what we've learned about subcommittees before, apparently it's in my hands, right? So although I did say at the last meeting that I didn't want to be an autocratic person on this, so I will open it up to the commission in an informal vote as to whether or not they would agree to have a subcommittee on this issue of gross area and gapping. Is that what we're talking about?
And I'll volunteer to be on the subcommittee with you.
Okay, so but I want to open it up to the entire commission to vote on whether or not we should pursue a subcommittee. So
I'm just saying, if the subcommittee was pursued, I would be volunteering.
Yeah, and that's fine. I appreciate you doing. So I would actually like to take a informal
I would
vote on.
I'd just say, if we have a couple people willing to do it, which we do, there is enough questions here. I think what we're really trying to do, Commissioner Ostrowski said, we were trying to be as fair to as many people as possible. I think we've already done that. Well,
I think you turned off your microphone.
well, I think we've already done that while, going through what we've gone through, but this is kind of an eye opener for me and there's some information there. Why not investigate it a little bit, see where it goes? So I'd be okay with it.
I'm also fine with it. I would early on just want to like the size of the problem and what problem you're going after. Like when we meet in a month or whatever, like talk about that would be pretty informative before you spend many months on it. But because I'd love to like understand that part.
I'd like to ask whether or not there's gonna be staff time involved in this.
I don't think we're asking for
No, we're
staff
not.
time. It will just be analysis and then presenting the analysis, to commission and then staff.
So, but you're gonna need data, are you not?
Yes, a lot of the data we need is publicly available, the parcel sizes are publicly available through assessor parcel maps, which can be downloaded. We don't. Yeah, so it's not like we need staff to spoon feed us, we can just.
I have an engineering background. I know some.
Okay, I just, well, I just don't want to find out that we end up, we have gotten staff involved in something where it's taken up their time. And I don't want to find out that after all this, that if you're saying that you can do it with little or no staff involvement, then I'd be, and it sounds like there's a majority consensus here, then I'll approve a subcommittee of Commissioner Kamkar and Commissioner Ostrowski on this.
Thank you.
If I may, had to do a little looking into creation of subcommittees as a result of things that went on in the city council. While the chair has the power to appoint to a committee, the committee has to be created by action of the body.
So we need a
So
formal vote.
you do need a motion and a vote on that.
All right.
So I'll make the motion.
Sure.
To create a subcommittee to investigate the issues of the gap in densities as well as the taking away of possible developable units through our 2040 general plan.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Commissioner Fields?
Aye.
Commissioner Strasburg?
Aye.
Commissioner Gray?
Aye.
Commissioner Blackwell?
Aye.
Vice Chair Kamkar?
Aye.
Chair Scissor? Nay. But it's passed, and I'll appoint Commissioner Kamkar and Commissioner Ostrowski to the subcommittee. Okay, for the community development, right?
I don't want to keep the commission at 10:35 at night. I'll just say it's likely we're canceling our next planning commission meeting, lack of items.
So we'll have from 7:30 to 10:30 to work on this.
Great for the subcommittee.
And I'll just say we're still hiring for a plan check examiner. This is critical for increasing throughput of building permits in our office. Qualified folks for that position, please send them over. And I have that.
What was the position again?
Plan check examiner. They review all building permits to make sure they meet the building codes.
Hey, Rob, speaking of Cressley, since Stephen brought it up, any updates on what's going on?
We had a request, I think I reported this before, from the developer to extend their building permits. They sent
That was coming up, yeah.
financing and so forth. They promise, capital P, that they are committed to the project. They've made some investments already. And they intend to come in and obtain permits sometime in the spring before summer.
Okay, thank you.
So I was walking downtown today and I was walking by what was the consignment furniture place? You guys know where that was?
No, in downtown?
Downtown, it's next to parking lot. Right? Big place. Yeah, consignment furniture.
Yeah, sure.
And they had it going out with sale, it's closed down, and the guy painting it. I said, you know what this is gonna be? And he's not expecting him to know, but he said it's gonna be a workout place. It's gonna be a gym. And so I don't know, they'll be asking for permits.
I don't know the status, but I heard the same thing.
Speaking of projects, I do take a walk down Union every so often, and that 7-unit townhouse project, the framing is going up this week. So see, if projects actually do get built. Just throwing that out.
Which one?
One down Union, roughly at Union and Quincy. So was one unit becomes 7 townhouses.